Hello everyone, Omni-Sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as the Shadow Monarch in the DC Universe, Part 3. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Arthur moved through the abandoned floor-level halls of the Jump City Broadcasting Tower, his eyes sharp, scanning every detail, every shadow. The place was eerily silent, the only sound being the faint hum of electricity running through the building's neglected systems. His grip on his Promethean sword never wavered as he stepped carefully, each movement deliberate. Empty. That's expected, considering the circumstances. Arthur closed his eyes, expanding his awareness. His senses stretched outward, searching, feeling, listening. Then, amidst the quiet, something stood out. A faint, unnatural breeze. It wasn't coming from any window, nor from any broken wall. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but he could feel it, like a gentle exhale through a hidden passage. His eyes snapped open, glowing brilliantly. Underground. Arthur clenched his fist, feeling raw power surge through his body. He pulled his arm back, muscles coiling like a loaded spring, and then boom. His punch obliterated the floor beneath him. Concrete and steel exploded outward, sending debris flying in all directions. The force sent a shockwave through the building, and before the dust could settle, Arthur dropped into the depths below. Arthur landed in a crouch, boots crunching against damp soil. He straightened, scanning the area, his glowing gaze cutting through the dimly lit underground chamber. Massive, twisting vines curled along the walls and ceiling, their surfaces pulsing faintly as if alive. The air was thick with a damp, earthy scent, mixed with something more artificial, chemicals, metal, machinery. Arthur's expression darkened. These are rather familiar. Thorned vines, unnatural growth, an overbearing floral scent. Could be the work of that woman. Poison ivy. It wouldn't be surprising if she was working with Joker on this. If this whole thing managed to cover multiple cities, then he was about to see exactly what they were planning. Arthur walked forward, weaving through the tangled underground jungle until he emerged into a massive, open space. For a brief second, even he was caught off guard. Towering glass cylinders lined the walls, filled with bubbling green liquid. Inside them, human figures floated, unmoving, unconscious. Some had restraints, others had wires drilled into their bodies, feeding something into them. Machines hissed and whirred, their mechanical limbs tending to the overgrowth of vines that slithered across metal surfaces like they belonged. In the center of it all, a colossal biomechanical structure pulsed like a beating heart, a fusion of twisted nature and advanced technology. Tubes of unknown fluid ran from the ceiling down into its roots, feeding whatever sick project was being cultivated here. Sick bastards, Arthur muttered to himself. And beneath it all, scattered on the ground, were dozens of unconscious bodies, each wearing a clown mask. Arthur knelt beside one, flipping them over. Their face was bruised and battered, nose broken, lips split. It wasn't the toxin that had put them down, it was a pair of human fists. Arthur smirked. Batman. Arthur narrowed his glowing eyes, scanning the massive contraption before him. The machine whirred and pulsed, tubes filled with some sickly green liquid running along its surface like veins. A faint hum of power vibrated through the underground chamber. It was still operational. He crossed his arms, tilting his head slightly. If Batman's already been here, then why the hell is this thing still running? Scratching the back of his head, he exhaled sharply, debating his next move. He wasn't exactly the think before you break type, but something about this situation made him hesitate. Destroying it felt like the right call, but was it? It didn't take long for Arthur to notice the strange, pulsing veins of green wove through the metal, organic yet mechanical, feeding the toxin through unseen hidden tunnels around him in this place. He ran a hand over one of the vines, feeling its unnatural warmth. So that's why the bat didn't destroy it. This isn't the only one, so he clearly went ahead and checked the other places here, he muttered, rubbing his chin. His fingers itched to just tear the thing apart, but if this was part of a bigger system, blindly wrecking it could make things worse. Then, footsteps. Arthur didn't turn immediately. He sensed them first. The measured, near-silent stride of the world's greatest detective. The lighter, confident steps of his protégé. The hovering presence just behind them, a faint hum of energy. His lip curled as he finally glanced over his shoulder. There they were. Batman. Robin. Green Lantern, just like Raven said. Batman stood at the entrance, his cape draped like a shadow. Robin, a smirk tugging at his lips, casually flipped a batarang in his hand, watching Arthur like a cat watches a cornered mouse. Green Lantern Hal Jordan floated just behind them, his emerald aura casting an eerie glow against the metallic walls. Batman's voice was calm, cold. I was hoping you wouldn't get involved here, Blackwind. Robin took a cautious step forward. Arthur. Arthur's glowing eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at them, then smirked. Robin. We meet again. Green Lantern, arms still crossed, glanced down at the motionless clown-masked thugs sprawled across the ground. He nudged one with his boot, confirming they were still out cold. He gave an approving nod. Good. They're still down. We got everything under control now. Arthur's smirk faded. His jaw tensed as his gaze swept over the toxin-filled tube still pulsing, the faint mechanical hum still present. Slowly, he turned back to Hal, his expression unreadable. Under control. He let out a humorless chuckle, stepping past them and motioning toward the chaos above. Look around you. Look at the city. His voice grew sharper, frustration lacing every word. You guys are terrible at your jobs. Hal frowned, clearly not appreciating the jab. Listen, Shadow Boy, Arthur ignored him and locked eyes with Batman. His glowing gaze burned with intensity. And you? Arthur took a step closer, his voice lowering but filled with challenge. Get involved. The hell are you talking about? This is my damn city too. Batman's voice came low, calm, but edged with authority. This is a dangerous place. The person behind it is unpredictable, unstable. This isn't something you should interfere with, leave it to the Justice League. Arthur scoffed, shaking his head. Right. Because you guys are doing such a great job handling it. He gestured around the underground lab filled with unconscious clown-masked thugs and writhing vines. I already know it's the Joker. I also know this. He motioned toward the plants entangled with machinery is Poison Ivy's handiwork. Batman's eyes didn't waver. Arthur took a step forward, voice cool but laced with accusation. But this? This technology? Joker's not the mastermind behind this kind of setup. He's theatrical, unpredictable, but he doesn't have the mind for this. He tapped his temple. No, this is someone else's work. Someone who actually knows how to weaponize fear on a mass scale. Arthur's gaze darkened as the realization clicked. Scarecrow. Silence stretched between them for a moment. Batman's expression remained unreadable beneath the cowl, but the slightest shift in his stance betrayed something, perhaps approval. Impressive. His voice was quiet but firm. Not only did you find this place, but you put that much together. He turned away, striding toward the massive toxin-infused machine, gloved fingers already moving to deactivate it. Step back. I'll turn this thing off. Arthur didn't move. Instead, his voice came out sharp, demanding. While it is their work, I don't think all of Gotham's maniacs are here. Where is the Joker? Batman stopped. He said nothing. Arthur's eyes narrowed, glowing faintly in the dim underground light. Batman's silence told him everything he needed to know. Something wasn't right. and Arthur was done being kept in the dark. Arthur's glowing eyes stayed locked on Batman, his voice slow and deliberate. "He's still here, isn't he? Somewhere in this building." Batman didn't answer. He didn't even acknowledge the question. Instead, he turned slightly, speaking over his shoulder. "Lantern, scan the area. Make sure we didn't miss anything before we shut this down. This is the source. If we take it out, the city starts to recover." Hal Jordan, who had been watching the exchange with his arms crossed, exhaled and lifted his ring. A wave of emerald light pulsed outward, sweeping across the room like an X-ray. The ring hummed as it processed the data, and then Hal frowned slightly before nodding. "Yeah, this is the mother machine. We already deactivated the others, no other active nodes. Shut it down, and this operation is toast." The machine hummed loudly, the final bits of circuitry sparking as Batman worked with precision, his fingers moving over the control panel, overriding systems with expert efficiency. With a low click, the machine powered down, its violent hum fading into nothingness. Batman stepped back, taking a breath, his gaze sweeping the room. "It's done," he said, his voice as steady as always. The machine shut down. Arthur's eyes, glowing faintly, sharpened as he turned toward the Dark Knight. His mouth curled into a smirk, though it was more a mixture of annoyance and amusement. But then, his eyes flickered. Something caught his attention. One of his demons had found something. "Good work," he muttered under his breath, his voice colder than usual. The shadows began to coil around his feet, swirling like a black mist. He was about to use Shadow Exchange and vanish, but Batman interfered. In the blink of an eye, Batman whipped a batarang from his belt, his eyes narrowing at the dark tendrils surrounding Arthur. Arthur's hand shot out, catching it mid-flight. With a swift squeeze, he crushed it effortlessly, the metal bending and breaking in his grip. He let the pieces fall to the ground with a faint clink, his glowing eyes locked on Batman. He glanced up at Batman, his eyes glowing brighter now, his patience wearing thin. He straightened, irritation clearly marking his features. "Seriously?" Arthur's voice was sharp, annoyed. Arthur stood firm, his glowing eyes locked onto Batman. The remains of the batarang crumbled between his fingers, falling to the ground with a faint clink. "You need to stand down," Batman ordered, his voice flat, deadly calm. Arthur's lips curled into a smirk, the faintest of chuckles escaping him. "I don't work for you, Batman. You found something, haven't you?" Batman's eyes narrowed, his voice hard. "This isn't a game, Blackwind. Stand down." Arthur stood silent, staring down the Dark Knight, the words hanging thick between them. He didn't answer, only tightened his fists, his gauntlets forming shadows that danced around his arms. That was all the confirmation the Dark Knight needed. "TT." Robin clicked his tongue, shifting into a stance, batarangs already between his fingers. Hal Jordan's ring flared to life, emerald energy swirling around his fists. "Then you leave me no choice," Batman said, and in the next breath. And then it happened. In the blink of an eye, they struck. Robin darted forward, his movements quick, almost a blur. A flurry of attacks came from the young hero, his staff swinging with precision aimed at Arthur's ribs, his legs kicking out in rapid succession. But Arthur was faster. He twisted sideways, sidestepping Robin's attack with a fluid motion. In one motion, he caught Robin's leg as it came towards him, snapping it with a sickening crack, before tossing the younger hero aside like a ragdoll. Robin hit the ground hard, groaning in pain, his face contorted in agony as he clutched his broken leg. "I told you before, next time I won't be so lenient," Arthur muttered, eyes glinting darkly as he looked at the fallen boy wonder. Batman's jaw clenched, and he moved forward, using his agility to close the gap in an instant. A barrage of punches rained down on Arthur, his fists aiming for Arthur's face, his kicks targeting vital spots. But Arthur barely flinched, his own fists moving like steel hammers to intercept the blows, countering with brutal force. Each strike from Batman hit with precision, but it was like hitting a wall of stone. Arthur absorbed it all, each punch only fueling his rage. His eyes glowed brighter, the bloodlust aura around him intensifying with every second. "You don't get it, do you, Bruce?" Arthur's voice was low, almost mocking. "Your punches can't stop me." Batman attempted a spin kick aimed at Arthur's side. But Arthur was too quick, stepping inside the strike and delivering a crushing blow to Batman's chest, sending him flying backward with a grunt of pain. Hal Jordan's voice cut through the chaos. "All right, Shadow Boy, it's time to get serious." His ring flared with green light as he summoned a massive construct, a giant fist that hurtled toward Arthur with the force of a freight train. Arthur met it head-on. He barely moved, just slamming his fist into the construct with a shockwave force that shattered it into 1,000 pieces. Hal Jordan launched himself forward, another massive construct spiked fist materializing in the air. It collided with Arthur with the force of a wrecking ball, sending him crashing into a stack of metal crates. The room trembled. Arthur rose, pushing away the debris with ruler's authority. "You think that's enough?" Arthur's voice was low, full of menace, but his grin never faded. Hal's eyes narrowed, his aura flaring brighter. "Not even close." Arthur sprang forward, slamming his fist into the side of Hal's construct, shattering it into pieces. But Hal wasn't done. With a roar, his ring glowed brighter as he summoned another wave of energy, a construct this time in the form of a massive, fist-shaped dragon. It soared toward Arthur, jaws open, ready to devour him whole. But Arthur was already gone. Arthur vanished in a whirl of darkness, reappearing behind Hal in an instant. Before Hal could react, Arthur's fist collided with his ribs, sending the lantern flying across the room. He crashed against a wall with enough force to crack the stone. Before Hal could react, Arthur was already in front of him, grabbing him by the throat and lifting him off the ground effortlessly. "You think you can harm me with that?" Arthur's voice was cold, dangerous. "You're just a man with a shiny ring, Hal. That doesn't scare me." Hal's fingers tightened and his ring glowed brighter, summoning another barrage of energy constructs. Spears, chains, and a blade formed around Arthur, but he destroyed them with his spar hand, breaking the weapons apart with ease. His strength and speed were superior. Hal gasped for air, struggling against the iron grip on his throat, but Arthur's smirk only deepened. "You're outmatched." With a roar of anger, Hal's ring surged, his body surrounded by a blazing aura. He summoned a massive construct of a green dragon, its jaws snapping, but Arthur, unfazed, plunged his fist into the creature's throat, shattering it like glass. Hal barely had time to react before Arthur punched him in the gut, sending him crashing into the wall. As Hal crumpled to the ground, barely conscious, "Is this all you've got? Your constructs are a bit weak. I think your will is not strong enough." Arthur turned his eyes back to Batman, his movements almost predatory. Batman pushed himself to his feet, blood trickling from his lip, his eyes narrowed with grim determination. "I won't stop until you do," he growled, advancing again. But Arthur's eyes were cold, and his grin only grew wider. Arthur stepped forward with lightning speed, driving his fist into Batman's chest, the impact sending a shockwave that rattled the entire place. Batman's body slammed into a metal pillar, his suit now smoking from the impact. The force was inhuman, as if Arthur wasn't holding back at all. Batman gasped for air, clutching his ribs, struggling to breathe. "You think this is over?" Arthur slowly shook his head, his smile widening. "No. It's just getting started." Arthur stood tall, his bloodlust radiated outward. "You still don't get it, do you? You try to fight with honor. You fight to control things, to tame evil. But some evil must be destroyed, wiped from existence before it can grow stronger. I will do what you can't." I do what has to be done. Batman's eyes narrowed, his breath ragged. And that's how you become a monster, Blackwind. Arthur's grin only grew more mocking. Call me whatever you want, you are the one trying to stop me from fighting evil. Who is the real monster here? Robin tried to push himself up, but he was in too much pain. His eyes locked on Arthur, his voice weak but defiant. You're wrong. Arthur's gaze turned toward Robin, but it was Batman who spoke up next. You're not the answer to this world's problems. You're just on a path to be another one. Batman continued, a cold fury behind them. This sense of justice of yours is dictatorship. It's not about saving the world, it's about controlling it, crushing everything you don't like. We stop them, we don't erase them. We give people the chance to change. Redemption. Redemption. Arthur's laugh was harsh, bitter. You're a blind fool if you think everyone deserves it. Some evil doesn't get to be saved. And Joker certainly is a lost cause. You don't get to decide that. Batman shot back. You're not God. Arthur's grin never faded. Maybe not, but I'm far from being evil. You are responsible for the deaths of many innocents, and you know that. Hal's laugh echoed through the room. Oh, no, not at all, he said sarcastically, flashing a toothy grin. I just think your powers are the best kind of evil incantation. Like, did you get those shadows from some creepy dark magic store? Because that is a lot of bad juju you're throwing around. Hal, still recovering, began to push himself up. His ring flared again, casting shadows as constructs formed once more, this time massive, a shield, chains, and a dozen blades. He wasn't giving up. You really need to stop, boy. Hal growled. But Arthur just narrowed his eyes and sighed. He wasn't backing down. Should I make it fair? He asked, taunting them. Or do I keep fighting alone? What's your choice, heroes? The shadow at his feet extended, creeping outward like a living thing, the air heavy with dread. His voice was low, mocking, as he sized up the three of them, his aura darkening. The shadow at Arthur's feet twisted, creeping outward like a living thing, swallowing the dim light. The air turned thick, heavy with an unnatural weight that pressed against Batman's senses. Arthur's voice was low, mocking. What's wrong, Batman? You look like you've seen a ghost. Batman didn't move, his sharp eyes analyzing every detail. He had seen Arthur's power already back through footage and also during this fight, his sheer strength, speed, durability, but this. He knew what came next. I know what you're about to do, Batman said, his voice unreadable. You'll summon those black wraiths. Things that shouldn't exist. His tone was controlled, but there was an edge of something else. Not fear, wariness. Arthur chuckled darkly. Right on cue. And then doom emerged. From the abyss at Arthur's feet, a towering figure rose, clad in pitch black, its body a silhouette of nightmares. Its eyes burned like embers in the void, and the moment it fully materialized, it did something that sent a shiver down even Batman's spine. It knelt. Doom growled, its voice deep and guttural, dripping with devotion. Robin, still clutching his injured leg, went still. Even through the pain, he managed to utter this, doomsday. Hal Jordan, still struggling to his feet, narrowed his eyes, his ring pulsing with green energy. Oh yeah, this just keeps getting better. First, we get Shadow Boy over here breaking ribs like it's a hobby, and now he's got the horror as a sidekick. You just love stacking the odds, don't you? Arthur didn't respond. Hal exhaled sharply and focused. His ring flared as he constructed a green support brace around Robin's shattered leg, solid, efficient, buying him some time. All right, Robin, you're patched up. Don't start breakdancing just yet. Batman remained silent, calculating. The presence of doom changed everything. If Arthur alone was already overwhelming, this was an entirely different fight. Arthur rolled his shoulders. I really didn't want to do this. His tone was casual, almost regretful, but his eyes gleamed with dark amusement. But take this as my advice, do try to stop him if you can. His smirk deepened. I wouldn't advise killing him, though. That's assuming you can. Hal gritted his teeth. You talk too much. His ring flared as he launched himself forward, forming a massive construct gauntlet around his fist, aiming straight for Arthur. Doom moved first. Before Hal could react, Doom's fist met his mid-air, the impact sounding like a gunshot. Boom! Hal Jordan was sent flying. His body crashed through a row of crates, tumbling across the floor before finally skidding to a stop. He coughed, pushing himself up, his ring flickering. Okay, oh. He looked at his construct. It was shattered. Arthur didn't even look at Hal. His attention remained on Batman. His voice was calm, almost disappointed. So what will it be? Arthur asked, tilting his head. Continue this and die for that clown. He stepped forward, his shadow stretching. Or let me be on my way. Batman didn't answer immediately. He just stared at Arthur, his expression unreadable, but his fists clenched at his sides. The fight wasn't just physical anymore. This was a battle of ideologies. Arthur could see it in Batman's eyes, the refusal to back down, the unyielding need to fight for control. It was who he was. No matter how battered, no matter how hopeless a situation looked, Batman never surrendered. And Arthur found that frustratingly predictable. So be it. A dark mist coiled at his feet, thick, unnatural. From its depths, another creature began to rise. A shadow demon. It was different from Doom, while it's much weaker, but no less terrifying. Its jagged form shifted in and out of the darkness, its eyes glowing. The moment it fully materialized, it let out a low, guttural snarl, its body twitching as if barely restrained. Arthur stepped back, giving a lazy gesture towards Batman and Robin. Keep them busy. His voice was smooth, but the command carried weight. The demon obeyed instantly. With a sudden burst of inhuman speed, it lunged, closing the distance between itself and Batman in the blink of an eye. Batman reacted immediately. His body twisted as he barely dodged the razor-sharp claws that swiped at him, his cape billowing as he landed into a defensive stance. Robin, despite his injured leg, with the help of Lantern's construct, he gritted his teeth and forced himself. His staff extended with a metallic snap as he swung at the creature's head. It caught the staff mid-swing. The moment it did, its red eyes gleamed, and it let out a low, eerie chuckle. Then, with brutal efficiency, it yanked Robin forward and slammed him into the ground. The impact cracked the floor, and Robin let out a sharp gasp of pain. As Batman turned his head, he barely caught a glimpse of Arthur before he disappeared completely into the abyss, his glowing blue eyes piercing through the darkness. And just before he vanished, he spoke, "Trust me on this one, Bruce. I'll do you a favor?" His voice was distorted, fading into the void. Batman's eyes widened slightly, and for the briefest moment, just a fraction of a second, he felt something rare. Dread. Arthur was gone. In his place, another shadow demon stood. And now there were two of them. Batman had no time to think. The demons attacked in unison, one going high, the other low. Batman's movements were precise, flawless, blocking, dodging, countering, but he was outnumbered, outmatched. Robin groaned, trying to push himself up, his eyes blazing with frustration. This? He hissed, gripping his staff tightly. This is bad. Batman's jaw clenched. His mind raced. He needed to stop Arthur before he reached Joker first. We need to stop him before he gets to Joker, he said, his voice sharp, urgent. On the other side, Hal Jordan was not having a great time. Doom was relentless. Each of Hal's constructs shattered on impact, his ring struggling to keep up with the sheer ferocity of the monster's attacks. Doom's massive fist swung, crashing through another barrier Hal had created just in time. The Green Lantern was sent skidding backward, his boots leaving deep marks on the ground as he barely kept himself standing. Hal wiped a bit of blood from the corner of his mouth, his ring flickering. "Kinda busy, Bats," he shot back, exasperated. Doom was already lunging again. Hal cursed under his breath. This wasn't going to end well. Arthur stepped through the doorway onto the rooftop, his senses sharpened, his eyes scanning the dimly lit skyline. The cold night air brushed against his skin, but he already noticed something. And then BRRRTTTTTT. A storm of bullets erupted, ripping through the night, tearing into the doorway behind him. The roar of Gatling guns echoed across the rooftop, the sheer force of it kicking up dust, debris, and smoke. Arthur didn't move. He didn't flinch. The bullets tore into his clothes, but they didn't pierce his skin. They flattened and clattered to the ground, utterly useless against his body. Through the thick veil of smoke, a high-pitched, maniacal laugh filled the air. "Oh ho ho! Whoops!" The voice was theatrical, exaggerated. "Did I get him? Hee hee, oh, who am I kidding? Of course not. That would have been way too easy." The wind shifted, blowing away the dust and revealing Arthur. Unscathed. His eyes burned a haunting blue, his expression unreadable as he stepped forward. That was when Arthur saw them. A dozen figures stood in a loose formation across the rooftop, clown masks covering their faces, each holding a different weapon. Some had machine guns, others baseball bats, knives, one even wielded a chainsaw. And at the center of them all, grinning like a devil in the pale moonlight, was the Joker. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing as he studied Arthur. Then, his painted lips stretched into that familiar, twisted grin. Well, you're not the Bat." His voice dripped with amusement, but there was something else lurking underneath. Curiosity. He took a step forward, twirling a revolver in his gloved hand. "You're meaner looking, but still all dark and broody. Maybe a cousin? A long-lost brother?" "No." He pointed at Arthur with the gun, chuckling. "You're something else entirely, Aranchacha boy." Arthur didn't blink. Didn't smile. Didn't even hesitate. He took another step forward, his shadow twisting beneath him, writhing like a living thing. His voice was low, calm, dangerous. "No. I'm something you can't laugh away." Joker's grin faltered. The clowns around him stiffened, their grips tightening on their weapons. Arthur kept walking forward. Joker's grin stretched wide, his eyes gleaming with twisted delight as he twirled his revolver like a showman. "Ooh, I like you already. No monologue? No justice of speech? Just straight to the nightmare fuel." His voice practically purred with amusement, but there was an edge of something else. Curiosity. Anticipation. With a dramatic flourish, he threw his arms out. "Boys, make him smile." And then hell erupted. The Gatling guns roared, spewing a hailstorm of bullets, the rooftop shaking from the sheer force. The clown-masked gunmen let out manic laughs, their fingers glued to the triggers, certain that nothing could survive that barrage. But Arthur was already moving. A blur. A shadow. A phantom among them. Bullets ripped through the air, but none found their mark. Arthur weaved between the shots with unnatural speed, his body shifting like a spectre. The glow of his Promethean sword flashed, and before they even knew what happened. Crack! A knife-wielding lunatic lunged at him. Arthur caught his wrist mid-strike, twisting sharply. Bone snapped like dry wood. The man howled in pain before a brutal kick sent him crashing into a metal vent, unconscious. Another goon swung the butt of his rifle. Arthur grabbed it mid-swing, yanking it out of his hands like he was taking a toy from a child. His fingers crushed the metal, bending it like tinfoil, before tossing it aside. The clowns faltered for a moment. Just a moment. It was a moment too long. Arthur raised a hand. Invisible force gripped them like puppets on strings. Bang! One of them suddenly turned his gun toward himself, a look of pure terror flashing behind his mask before pulling the trigger. Another thug tried to resist, but his finger squeezed the trigger against his will, unloading into his own squad. Bodies collapsed. Screams turned into silence. The remaining clowns scrambled, horror setting in as they realized this wasn't a fight. This was a slaughter. And Arthur? He wasn't even trying. Joker's laughter pierced through the carnage, cutting through the air like a blade. It was a raw, unhinged sound, a mix of amusement, awe, and sheer excitement. Oh ho ho! Now that's entertainment. He clapped, actually clapped like he was watching the greatest show on earth. You're definitely not Bats's cousin, that's for sure. He leaned forward, eyes twinkling with sadistic joy. No's a no-kill rule holding YA back, no broody speeches. Oh, I like you. Arthur didn't answer. His glowing eyes cut through the smoke like twin beacons of death. His gaze locked onto Joker. Then he spoke. Arise. From the corpses of the fallen clowns, shadows twisted and writhed, unnatural forms clawing their way from the void of their bodies, glowing eyes turned toward Joker, empty yet brimming with intent. The remaining thugs, those still breathing, staggered backward, their bravado and madness draining as they realized they were standing among the dead. One dropped his gun. Another turned and ran, tripping over himself. And then, hell broke loose. The risen shadows attacked, merciless, inhuman. The air filled with screams of men who once reveled in terror, now reduced to prey. Throats crushed, bones snapped like twigs. Blood splattered the rooftop. A man tried to flee, one of Joker's top goons. A shadow caught him, its hand piercing straight through his chest. Another thug fired wildly before a black hand yanked him off the edge. It was over in seconds. And only Joker remained. He just tilted his head, watching. Then he grinned. Oh ho ho ho. Now that's a party trick. He clapped his hands together, reaching into his coat. Click. Boom. A grenade launcher roared, spitting a bright green canister straight at Arthur. The impact detonated on his chest, unleashing a swirling cloud of Joker toxin, thick, acrid, curling like grasping fingers around him. Joker cackled. Ah. Have a laugh, will YA? It's on the house. And then a sound cut through the chaos. Low at first. Unmistakable. A chuckle. Then, it grew deep, rich, mocking. Through the green fog, through the madness, a silhouette emerged. Arthur was laughing. Not the Joker's kind of laugh. Not wild, erratic. No. This was something else. Slow. Cold. Measured. Like a predator humoring its prey. Joker's grin faltered for half a second. Arthur walked forward, untouched, unbothered. System notification, immunity to poison. Harmful substance cleared. The gas dissipated around him like mist meeting an unstoppable tide. His eyes, those damn glowing eyes, never left Joker. Joker chuckled, almost nervous. Ooh, that's not fair. Arthur didn't respond. His risen soldiers surrounded Joker, now still, like statues. Waiting. Watching. Joker sucked in a breath. All right, you win round one. His hand dove into the crate beside him, and he pulled out a little girl. She couldn't be older than 7, small, fragile, her cheeks smeared with dirt. Terror twisted her face. Her eyes darted around, her tiny hands clutching at Joker's sleeve. "Help," she whimpered, voice shaking. Joker leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "Shush, sweetheart. Don't ruin the punchline." He turned back to Arthur, his grin splitting wider as he dragged her toward the edge of the rooftop. With his free hand, he pulled out a knife, pressing it lightly against her lips. "You know, I was saving this one for bats." He sighed, shaking his head. "But, hey! Plans change." The moment his foot touched the ledge, Arthur raised a hand. "Ruler's authority." Joker jerked. His hand twitched violently, not from nerves, but from raw, unseen force crushing his fingers one by one. Crack! His index finger snapped. Then his middle. Then his ring. 1. By 1. The little girl screamed, thrashing, but Joker? He didn't scream. He laughed. A guttural, broken cackle, each bone-snapping twist only making him shudder in delight. His grin stretched impossibly wide, his breath ragged. "Oh ho ho ho, tickles." He tilted his head, giggling through clenched teeth. You really are fun." Arthur's voice was ice. "You can smile even wider now." Joker shuddered violently. His own fingers betrayed him, his own grip tightening around the knife, not on the girl, but on himself. With a sharp motion he stabbed himself in the mouth. The blade pierced through his cheek, blood dripping down his chin, yet his laughter only grew louder, wilder. His free hand yanked the girl closer, his lips brushing against her ear, his voice a manic whisper. "Now I get it." He licked his bloody lips, eyes dilated with a sick, newfound clarity. "I know who you are." "No, you don't," Arthur said calmly. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Joker stood there, grinning, blood still dripping from the corners of his mouth. His fingers twitched inside his sleeve, and Arthur felt it before he saw it. Something was off. A shift in the air. A faint metallic click. A presence of pure, reckless intent. Then Joker yanked his arm free, revealing the dead man's switch. "Surprise, surprise, champ, we both go boom." And he pressed it. Arthur for a second thought he was bluffing, but it detonated. Boom! The rooftop was consumed in an instant. Fire and raw force erupted outward like a tidal wave of death, swallowing everything in a violent, apocalyptic bloom. But Arthur was already moving. Ruler's authority. His unseen power snatched the child, pulling her into his grasp as his cloak whipped violently in the blast wave. Then came the shock wave. Windows shattered. Steel twisted. The very air howled. The explosion didn't just claim the rooftop, it swallowed the entire building. The structure groaned, a dying beast, before the upper floors collapsed in a chain reaction of destruction. Debris rained like meteors. Shattered concrete and molten metal plunged through the night sky, swallowed by plumes of fire and smoke. And then the ground gave way. Arthur, still shielding the girl, was swallowed by the collapse. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. Then rubble shifted. An unseen force throwing slabs of concrete aside like weightless paper. From beneath the mountain of wreckage, Arthur emerged, his cloak tattered, but still standing. And, in his arms, the girl. Unharmed. He exhaled. Then, in a low voice, full of sheer frustration, Crazy Bastard tried to take everyone with him. His glowing eyes flickered in the dark, scanning the destruction. Arthur's boots crunched against the wreckage as he stepped forward, still holding the child in his arms. The night burned around him, the remains of the collapsed building a ruin of fire, smoke, and twisted steel. And then a sound. A wheezing, ragged chuckle. Arthur's glowing gaze flicked to the side. Joker was still alive. Barely. He was half buried under debris, his suit charred, his left leg twisted at a sickening angle. His right arm was missing from the elbow down, blood pooling beneath him. But the bastard was still laughing. Through blooded teeth, Joker lifted his gaze, barely able to focus, but still, he grinned. Heh! You are fun, kid. Really fun. Arthur stiffened. Joker coughed, blood splattering from his lips. His voice was weak, barely a whisper, but the amusement never left. Don't let the world take that from YA. Arthur's eyes snapped wide open. Arthur stood there, unmoving, the orange glow of the fires flickering against his face. Joker was still grinning, his breaths ragged and wet, his body broken. Yet somehow, even at the edge of death, he still laughed. Arthur's jaw clenched. Because this had happened before. He said the same thing. The words barely left his lips, a whisper only for himself. The Joker from the tower. The one he fought before. The one who bled just like this. The one who laughed just like this. A memory burned into his mind. And then his grip tightened. His Promethean sword materialized, the dark blade gleaming in the glow of the fires. One clean strike. One final cut. But then, he stopped. He is dead. The words rang in his mind. Not for Joker. For himself. The sword faded away, dissolving back into his inventory. Joker's final laugh still echoed in his mind. Before the explosion, underground area the battlefield was chaos. Green Lantern struggled against Doom, his ring creating barriers, hammers, and chains all did very little to deter this monstrosity. Doom was relentless, his form an immovable force, every strike heavier than the last. On the other side, Batman and Robin fought against Arthur's shadow demons, the wraiths moving unnaturally, warping around attacks, their cold, empty eyes piercing through the Dark Knight's defenses. But Batman was nothing if not adaptable. He sidestepped a clawed swipe, countered with a shock batarang that sent one of the demons stumbling. And then he saw it. A pattern. A slight delay in its movement. His mind worked fast, calculating. Then he struck. A perfectly executed attack, precise and brutal, sending the shadow creature reeling. It let out a distorted screech. Batman narrowed his eyes. No matter what you are, you can be beaten. Robin, panting, still fighting his own wraith, grinned. Yeah, sure, let me know when you've got the cheat code for mine. Hal gritted his teeth, wiping blood from his lip. Doom had sent him crashing through a concrete wall, the impact shaking the ground. His chest ached. His ring flickered. But he wasn't down. He pushed himself up, ring glowing brighter. In brightest day. Doom tilted his head slightly, mocking. In blackest night. Doom crossed his arms, just standing there, waiting. No evil shall escape my sight? A low, amused rumble came from Doom's chest. Let those who worship evil's might. Hal's ring flared like a sun, illuminating the battlefield. Beware my power, Green Lantern's light. And then an explosion. A thunderous boom tore through the night, shaking the entire place. A fiery inferno burst from above them, consuming everything in its path. The shockwave hit like a tidal wave, sending Batman skidding back, Robin barely catching himself. Doom and Hal both turned. Debris began to rain down, massive chunks of stone and steel collapsing toward them. Arthur's shadow suddenly withdrew, dissolving into the ground, retreating. Hal's ring pulsed as he threw up a massive shield, protecting himself and the others from the falling wreckage. Sweat dripped down his temple, his heart pounding. He exhaled. "You've got to be kidding me." Batman gritted his teeth, eyes narrowing behind the cowl as the explosion roared, sending shockwaves through the underground area. His cape whipped violently from the force, embers scattering across the place like fireflies. He barely reacted to the debris. His mind was already working. Joker! It had to be. Batman's fists clenched. Damn it! His voice was low, grim, the growl of a man who'd seen this kind of madness before. Hal's shield flickered, absorbing the last of the falling wreckage. The Green Lantern exhaled sharply, lowering his hand as the green glow dimmed slightly. "Those shadows are gone." Hal looked at Batman, brow furrowed. "You think that boy's dead?" Batman's jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away. His mind ran through every possible outcome. Arthur wasn't the type to go down easily, but Joker? That psychotic bastard would rather take the whole city down than let someone walk away with a win. Finally, Batman turned, his cape billowing as he started toward the wreckage. "Let's hurry back up." Robin fell in step next to him. "You really think Joker just blew everything up?" Batman's eyes stayed locked ahead. "If he did, that means whatever happened up there is worse than we thought." Hal cracked his neck, sighing. Fan-freaking-tastic. Love a surprise bombing. Arthur stood still, his glowing eyes locked onto Joker's lifeless body sprawled among the wreckage. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the cracked concrete, the grotesque grin frozen on his pale, battered face. For a long moment, Arthur just stared. His fingers flexed, Promethean blade still shimmering faintly in his grip. Then, he raised his hand. "You're not even worthy being a shadow soldier." His voice was cold, final. And yet, he tilted his head slightly, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Although," Arthur exhaled, his glowing gaze narrowing, "I do think you might be a fine addition. Just my guess." He spread his fingers. Dark energy coiled at his fingertips. The air grew thick, the ground rumbled faintly as tendrils of black mist slithered out from Joker's corpse. Arthur's voice dropped into a whisper, yet it carried like a command of a monarch. "Arise." The shadows exploded outward, swirling violently before condensing into a single figure rising from the ground like a nightmare-given form. And then, there he was. A new Joker. His body was jet black, his features carved from darkness itself, yet his smile remained, stretched wide with the same unhinged glee. His glowing purple eyes locked onto Arthur, unwavering. Then, the shadowed Joker knelt. A low chuckle rumbled from his throat, a sound that wasn't quite human anymore. It was deeper, more guttural, yet undeniably Joker. Arthur didn't even acknowledge him further. He simply turned away, his cape fluttering behind him, stepping forward. The shadow melted into the ground, slipping into the darkness beneath Arthur's feet. The sound of crumbling debris filled the air as Batman, Green Lantern, and Robin rushed onto the scene, their boots skidding slightly against the ash-covered ground. Smoke still curled from the wreckage, embers flickering in the night. The entire building had been reduced to nothing but remains, and at the center of it all, Arthur stood there. A massive shadow demon loomed beside him, its eerie, inky form carrying a small child in its arms, a little girl, seemingly unfazed, giggling as she poked at the creature's horned head. The monster, despite its terrifying presence, tilted its head curiously, like some obedient hound indulging a playful master. Hal was the first to react. He blinked. Hard. Okay. What the actual hell am I looking at? Arthur didn't answer. His glowing eyes flicked to Batman, who was scanning the scene. The detective's sharp gaze darted across the rubble, searching, piecing together everything at a glance. He didn't need to ask, He was looking for Joker. Arthur raised his hand and silently gestured toward a darker corner of the ruined site. No words. Just a simple motion. Batman was already moving. His long cape swept behind him as he advanced, crouching when he reached the spot. And there, sprawled in the dust and blood, lay the lifeless corpse of the Joker. His grin was still there, that awful, frozen smirk, but his body? Broken. Blooded and empty. Batman said nothing. Just a slow exhale through the nose, a small tightening of his jaw. He stood, shadows swallowing his expression. Meanwhile, Arthur turned to the shadow demon, giving it a small nod. The creature walked forward, its massive form shockingly gentle as it lowered the girl into Hal's arms. Hal, who had faced galactic tyrants and entities beyond human comprehension, was speechless. He stared at the kid in his arms, then at the nightmare of a shadow creature that had just handed her to him. Then back at Arthur. The little girl beamed at her savior and the creature, clutching onto Hal's uniform. "Thank you, mister," she chirped, then turned to the shadow demon. "And you too, big guy." She gave it a tiny wave. The shadow demon, a creature of pure darkness, forged from death itself, bowed its head slightly, as if acknowledging the gratitude. Arthur actually smiled. A real, genuine smile. Not his usual smirk. Then he turned to Hal, his voice carrying an edge of amused disdain. "At least take that kid back to her home." His glowing eyes narrowed slightly. "This should be something you guys can do without messing up." For once, Hal Jordan had nothing to say. Batman stood over Joker's lifeless body, staring. The twisted smile was frozen in death, but that didn't make it feel like a victory. It never did. His cape swayed behind him as he straightened, turning toward Arthur, his voice low and edged with quiet frustration. "I could have prevented this from happening, if only you had agreed to stand down." Arthur didn't even glance at him. Didn't even acknowledge the weight in Batman's words. He stood there, still as a shadow, the glow in his eyes dimming slightly. "No, you wouldn't." His tone was flat, certain. Cold. He finally turned his head slightly toward the Dark Knight, but not enough to fully face him. "He'd just outsmart you. He'd escape, disappear into the cracks of this city, like he always does. Then he'd come back to terrorize someone else, somewhere else." Batman's jaw clenched. His silence was heavy, but Arthur could feel it. Could feel the weight of the burden Bruce carried, the responsibility he shackled himself with. Finally, the Bat spoke, his voice quieter. "That's not how justice works." Arthur let out a slow exhale. His fingers flexed at his sides, as if suppressing something. "Justice?" He let the word hang there for a moment. A humorless chuckle followed, before his expression turned unreadable again. That man didn't care about justice. Didn't care about losing, didn't care about winning. His voice hardened. Joker only cared about proving a point, and of course playing the mouse and cat with you. His gaze drifted back to the ruins of the building, to the chaos Joker had left behind. Then, for the first time, Arthur's voice carried something real. Regret, but not because of Joker's death, the total opposite. "I wish I had been the one to finish him off." His fingers curled into a slow fist before he relaxed them. But that maniac would rather die on his own terms. He wasn't looking for a fight. He chose an ending that played by his rules. Silence. Batman didn't answer immediately. Because he knew deep down that Arthur was right, but he would never admit it. Arthur noticed the toxic mist clearing from the city. The unnatural green haze that had choked the streets was finally dissipating, fading into nothing. The damage was done, but the worst was over. Arthur exhaled slowly, scanning the aftermath before turning his attention back to the trio before him. I won't interfere with what's happening in other cities." His tone was calm, firm, final. "That's up to you and the Justice League to fix. You deal with Ivy or whoever else is involved." Batman's expression remained unreadable, but his posture stiffened slightly. Hal, still holding the rescued child, furrowed his brow but said nothing. Then, Arthur's glowing eyes narrowed. The temperature seemed to shift as his gaze swept over them, settling on Batman. His voice was quieter, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "If any of Gotham's maniacs come to this place, well, Bruce, you already know. A warning. Not a threat. Not a challenge. A promise." Batman's fingers twitched slightly. The weight of Arthur's words wasn't lost on him. Hal let out a slow breath, shifting the kid slightly in his arms. "You know you are still giving me the creeps." His usual snark was there, but there was an edge to his voice. He'd seen a lot of things, but Arthur's presence was something different. Robin stood stiffly, silent. He wasn't stupid. He knew that if Arthur had truly wanted them all dead, this conversation wouldn't even be happening. "Well then, am I free to go?" Arthur asked, raising both hands mockingly, as if expecting cuffs. His voice was laced with amusement, the question dripping with barely restrained arrogance. Neither Batman nor Hal responded immediately. Robin tensed slightly. Arthur tilted his head, watching them for a moment longer before he added, almost casually, "Well, you know where I live anyway." And just like that he turned. The moment his foot touched the nearest shadow, he was gone. The only thing left was the lingering sensation that he was still watching them, from somewhere. A long, heavy silence followed. Hal let out a breath and rubbed his temple. "Okay. Gotta ask, how the hell did he know our actual names?" Batman's jaw tightened as he turned slightly toward the ruins, his mind already piecing things together. "That's his way of telling us that he knows where to bite us. Where to find us." Batman's voice was steady, but there was a sharp edge to it. "He knows we can track him, so he's evening the playing field." Hal stared at where Arthur had disappeared, brow furrowing. He had fought aliens, and everything in between. Is he really just a kid? Batman didn't answer immediately. Because, deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. 2 days later, Blackwind Estate. Arthur sat at his table, idly stabbing a fork into his meal as the television droned on in the background. The news anchor spoke with that usual mix of forced professionalism and barely hidden relief. Thanks to the combined efforts of the Justice League, the remaining traces of the toxin plaguing the cities have been successfully neutralized. Several known associates of Poison Ivy have been apprehended, including... Arthur barely listened. Same old, same old. But then, and in other news, sources have confirmed that the infamous Gotham criminal known as the Joker has been found dead among the wreckage of Jump City's broadcasting tower. Authorities are still investigating. Arthur paused mid-bite. His fork hovered over his plate, his eyes turning towards the screen. Well, these past few days have been rather calm. He leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping lazily against the table. I expected Batman to send some Justice League members knocking by now, but... He scoffed, shaking his head. Guess not. Still, something about it gnawed at him. Batman wasn't the type to just drop things like that. He was waiting. For what? Arthur wasn't sure. Arthur tapped his fingers against the table, the news still playing in the background. His gaze drifted toward his phone. This was as good a time as any. He grabbed the device, dialing without hesitation. A single ring. Then, click. You've seen the news, right? Arthur said, keeping his tone casual. Of course. Adam's voice came through the receiver, steady as ever. And I take it you had something to do with what happened there. Arthur smirked. Perhaps. There was a brief silence. Adam didn't press, but that's not the reason I called. Arthur leaned against the table, voice dropping slightly. I need you to buy a place for me. A house in Gotham. A beat. Gotham? Adam repeated, his tone almost amused. Don't use our name. Don't use anyone associated with us. Use someone who can't be tracked back to us. There was a pause, then a soft exhale. I won't ask why you'd willingly go to that hellhole, but fine. It shall be done. Arthur chuckled. Knew I could count on you. He was about to end the call when something else crossed his mind. One more thing, about the Titans. Did you? Yes, Adam cut him off smoothly. I've already sued them for property damage. Arthur grinned. Brilliant. Anything else? That's all for now. Click. Arthur set the phone down, rolling his shoulders. Time to go. Arthur stood up, stretching as he moved toward the door. He stepped outside. But then a pulse. A presence. His instincts flared, his muscles tensed. His eyes snapped wide open, glowing faintly as he sensed something descending fast from the sky. For a split second, his fingers twitched, ready to summon his blade. But then, he exhaled. The tension drained from his shoulders as he smirked slightly, tilting his head upward. Oh, it's just her. A gust of wind rushed through the air as she landed. Not with a crash. Not with the typical superhero's impact that shattered the ground. No, Kara Zor-El landed gracefully, like she barely even disturbed the earth beneath her boots. Arthur stood there, arms crossed, his gaze steady. Kara wasn't wearing her usual uniform. No Tess on her chest, no cape fluttering behind her. Just casual clothes, a simple white top, jeans, and sneakers. But the look in her eyes? Pure Kryptonian determination. Finally, she huffed, hands on her hips. Do you know how hard it is to track you down? Arthur blinked. Stop lying, I wasn't exactly hiding, and this is literally my home. Kara scoffed. Yeah, well, you're in the League's radar. Then she leaned in slightly, eyes narrowing. And let me guess, it had something to do with recent events with Batman. Arthur smirked. Sounds about right. She rolled her eyes but then clapped her hands together. Anyway, you owe me, mister. Arthur tilted his head. For what exactly? Kara pointed a finger at him, eyes narrowing playfully. Oh, don't know what exactly, me. You promised me a date. Arthur stared at her for a second, then... Oh. Right. That. Now that she mentioned it, he did recall making some vague promise before getting caught up with, well, everything. Oh yeah, Arthur muttered, scratching the back of his head. Kara grinned triumphantly. Oh yeah, she echoed, mimicking his tone. That's all you have to say. Arthur sighed. You're not going to let this go, are you? Nope. She crossed her arms, looking way too pleased with herself. Lucky for you, I was in a generous mood today, so I figured I'd come and collect what's owed. Arthur exhaled through his nose, amusement tugging at his lips. And I assume you expect me to just drop everything and go? Kara grinned wider. Exactly. But you're not busy, right? Arthur hesitated, glancing back at his house. Well, no. I'm not exactly occupied right now, but... He didn't get to finish that sentence. Before the words could even fully leave his mouth, she grabbed his wrist. And then the ground disappeared beneath his feet. What? A rush of wind roared past his ears as Kara shot into the sky, dragging him along like he weighed nothing. Arthur barely had time to process the fact that his entire situation had changed in an instant. 1 second, he was standing with both feet firmly on the ground. The next, he was airborne. Flying at insane speeds. Upside down for a second. Then right side up again. What the hell, Kara? Arthur snapped, glaring at her. Kara just laughed. Relax, Shadow King. I've got you. Arthur grumbled, shadows flickering around his body as if his instincts were telling him to just shadow exchange the hell out of here. But Kara just grinned, tightening her grip on his wrist. No shadow tricks. You're stuck with me for the day. Arthur just sighed. This was happening. The rush of wind finally settled. Arthur's boots touched solid ground again, and thankfully, it wasn't upside down. He exhaled slowly, adjusting his coat as his eyes scanned their surroundings. Snow. Crisp, untouched snow. A cool breeze brushed against him, carrying the scent of pine and fresh mountain air. The sky stretched endlessly above them, dyed in hues of orange and purple as the sun began its descent. Below, vast landscapes of forests, lakes, and towns sprawled into the horizon. Arthur took a deep breath, then exhaled. Let me guess, he said dryly, turning to Kara. We're halfway across the globe. Kara grinned, hands on her hips. Not quite. She turned, gesturing dramatically. But yeah. Arthur narrowed his eyes, his brain piecing things together. Snow. High altitude. The air was thin, but not enough to bother him. The view, something about it felt familiar. He followed Kara's gaze and there it was. A peak rising majestically into the sky, towering over everything. Mount Fuji. Arthur blinked. You brought us to Japan. Kara turned back, flashing an innocent smile. Yup. Arthur raised an eyebrow. I thought this was supposed to be a date, not an international field trip. Kara shrugged. Details. Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. You know, normal people go to a cafe or a restaurant, maybe a movie if they're feeling fancy. He gestured to their surroundings. Not to the top of Japan's most famous mountain. Kara smirked. Yeah, but you're not normal. And neither am I. She shot him a wink. Figured we should start big. Arthur exhaled sharply, but there was a hint of amusement in his expression. Fair enough. Kara laughed. Come on, admit it. This is way better than a boring dinner, right? Arthur glanced around again. He had to admit, the view was stunning. The sheer silence of the peak, untouched by the noise of civilization, was almost peaceful. It was a rare feeling. I'll give you that, he said finally. Kara pumped a fist. Ah. See? You're already enjoying it. Arthur sighed, shaking his head. Well, I might have needed a bit of this lately. Kara just grinned. Same thing, oh, you have no idea. The summit was silent. Not the kind of forced, tense silence Arthur was used to, but a peaceful, natural kind. The wind whispered as it passed, stirring Kara's golden hair as she sat cross-legged on the snow, completely unaffected by the cold. Arthur sat across from her, leaning back on his elbows, his glowing eyes gazing at the horizon. Kara sighed in contentment. Man! It feels good to just breathe after all that chaos. Arthur raised an eyebrow. You were enjoying yourself back there. Kara grinned, her bright blue eyes practically sparkling. Are you kidding? That whole toxin mess. Fighting off lunatics and supervillains? It was great. Arthur gave her a deadpan look. You realize that's not a normal reaction, right? Kara just shrugged, still smiling. I am Kryptonian. We like a good fight. She tilted her head. And speaking of fights, I heard you went toe-to-toe with Batman and Green Lantern. Arthur exhaled through his nose. Toe-to-toe are more like I schooled them, but yeah, unfortunately, I did. Kara's eyes lit up like a child hearing about Christmas. You actually fought Batman? Arthur waved a dismissive hand. He's smart, I'll give him that, but at the end of the day, he's just a rich man in a bat costume. Kara blinked, then grinned. You know, normally I'd argue, but you kinda have a point. Arthur smirked. Of course I do. Kara leaned forward, resting her cheek on her hand, eyes still sparkling. Still, Batman always gives off that I can beat anyone energy. Arthur snorted. Sure. Until he runs into someone he actually can't beat, which are many. Kara hummed, thinking. Then her eyes widened. Wait a minute, rich man. You already know who he is. Arthur gave her a sideways glance. Wasn't that hard to figure out? He smirked slightly. Bruce Wayne. Kara gawked. Just like that? Arthur shrugged. The guy disappears at night. Has access to ridiculous tech. Knows way too much about everything. And, you know, that whole adopt a bunch of orphans and train them to fight thing. Kara crossed her arms. You say it like it's obvious. Arthur just gave her a look. Well, it is for me, because I already knew that. He thought to himself. She sighed, shaking her head. Well, since you're not in the league, I'm really curious about what Bruce is gonna do now. Arthur smirked slightly. Nothing. Kara raised an eyebrow. Oh? Arthur leaned back, stretching his arms. Because he's smart enough to know I'm not gonna tell the wrong people. I think I've already established that with him. Kara just stared at him, resting both hands on her cheeks, completely focused on him like he was telling the greatest story ever. Arthur noticed. His eyes narrowed. What? Kara's eyes glowed slightly. Someone who actually stood up to Batman. She exhaled, shaking her head. You are even more interesting than I thought. Arthur scoffed. Why do you guys respect him so much anyway? His iron rule is problematic. Ends up harming more innocents than it helps. Kara's expression sobered. She sighed. It's about Joker, isn't it? Arthur's eyes darkened. His fists clenched. My only regret is not killing that bastard myself before he blow us all up, including himself. Kara said nothing for a moment. She just watched him. Then, softly, she said, but he's gone now. Arthur exhaled through his nose. He looked away, watching the sun in the horizon. Yeah. The wind swept gently across the mountain peak, carrying the crisp scent of snow and pine. From up here, the world felt distant, tiny lights from the cities below flickering like fireflies. Arthur sat with his arms resting on his knees, his gaze locked on the horizon. Kara sat beside him, leaning back on her hands, staring up at the sky. The world had just barely survived another catastrophe, but for once, things felt still. Then, she turned to him, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. So, what's your goal, Arthur? Arthur exhaled through his nose, not looking at her. That's a loaded question, Justice League agent. You really don't like the Justice League, Kara pressed, tilting her head slightly. I mean, you fought Batman. Arthur said calmly, it's not that I have problems with the Justice League members. I just don't think they do what needs to be done. Kara frowned. You think they're not doing enough? Arthur's eye sharpened. They didn't even find you when Lex took you, did they? Kara stiffened. I'm pretty sure Luthor got what he wanted from you already, Arthur continued, his voice edged with something colder. Thanks to them. Kara's hands clenched into fists, but she didn't lash out. Instead, she looked away, her expression conflicted. It's not that simple. Arthur's eyes snapped toward her, his gaze intense. What about Lex? Do they still have him? Kara hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, but I don't think they can keep him in custody for long. Arthur's expression darkened. Legal reasons, of course, and the cycle continues. Kara let out a bitter chuckle. That's how it always is, isn't it? Arthur exhaled slowly, leaning forward. He already knew the answer, but he asked anyway. How long do you think until he's free again? Kara didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because they both already knew. Silence lingered between them, the wind the only sound filling the air. Kara sighed, shaking her head. Enough about that. Why are we even talking about this right now? Arthur let out a low breath, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Because we can't escape that life, maybe that's why we can only talk about that sort of stuff. Kara bit her lip, looking down. She knew he was right. No matter what, the world would always drag them back into the chaos. Still, she wanted to believe there was more to life than just supervillains, fighting, and all that. She turned back to him, searching his expression. You never answered my question, you know. What is your goal, Arthur? Arthur was silent for a moment before he finally spoke. Growing stronger, that's a start. Kara shot him a wink. You are plenty strong already. Arthur simply replied, and not enough. The wind still howled around them as they sat atop the peak, staring out at the world below. Kara stretched, letting out a breath as if releasing the weight of their conversation. You know what? She said, brushing her hair back. Let's change the scenery. Arthur glanced at her, arching a brow. Any place in particular? Kara grinned. Anywhere but here. Arthur's smirk was slow, confident. You know. I have a place in mind. The streets of Italy, the sounds of a bustling city filled the air, the chatter of locals, the distant hum of Vespers weaving through cobblestone roads, the scent of fresh espresso and baked pastries wafting through the air. Italy was alive, the late afternoon sun casting golden hues across the streets. And among the crowds, walking casually like they weren't two of the most powerful beings on the planet, were Arthur and Kara. Kara inhaled deeply, closing her eyes for a moment. Okay, yeah. This was a good idea. Told you, Arthur said, hands in his pockets, taking in the city like he belonged there. They weaved through the streets, blending in seamlessly. Tourists, locals, and street performers filled the open plazas. Arthur's eyes flicked to a large banner hanging from a nearby building, an advertisement for an upcoming race. Formula One Grand Prix, sold out. Arthur pointed towards it and said, let's attend that race. Kara followed his gaze, raising a brow. Wait, is that today? It does say it's sold out. Arthur nodded. Looks like it. Kara whistled. So what now? And aren't those tickets expensive? Arthur stopped walking, reaching into his jacket. A small, knowing smirk played at his lips as he pulled out a sleek, black credit card and held it up between his fingers. Well, I do have another superpower. Kara squinted at it, then at him. Of course. Arthur's smirk deepened. I'm rich. Kara burst out laughing, shaking her head. All right, Bruce Jr., let's see if money really can buy happiness. Arthur chuckled. Oh, it can. Let's find out. The engines roared through the air, a deafening symphony of speed and precision. The crowd erupted in cheers as the cars screamed past, navigating tight corners and pushing their limits down the straights. From the comfort of the VIP section, Arthur and Kara sat back, enjoying the spectacle. So, they weren't sold out? She asked, arms crossed. And not only that, we're in VIP seats. Arthur, lounging beside her, didn't even look up from his plate of pasta. He simply smirked. I told you, Kara, nothing is ever really sold out, as long as you're rich enough. Kara was lounging, sunglasses on, sipping from a drink as she glanced at Arthur. I gotta admit, I never thought you would be interested in something like this. Arthur, mid-bite into his plate, merely smirked. Oh, I enjoy a good competition. But then, his eyes snapped open, glowing faintly, though he didn't move. He could feel it. Even through the sea of people, through the noise and energy of the Grand Prix, there was a disturbance, a familiar, unmistakable aura attempting to suppress itself. Even Kara can't sense it, that magic can't be hidden no matter how hard you try. Arthur exhaled through his nose, then simply smiled, closing his eyes again like nothing had happened. He lifted his fork, twirling the pasta, before subtly sending out blade. His shadow assassin, toward a high vantage point overlooking the track. As the final laps of the race unfolded, the tension in the track was electric. The battle for the lead had boiled down to a dramatic duel between two cars, one bright red, the other sporting the infamous orange and energy drink sponsor colors. Arthur's fingers twitched subtly, a silent signal. From his hidden perch, Blade adjusted his long-range shadow rifle, his shadowy form barely noticeable against the surrounding architecture. A single, precise shot rang out, inaudible beneath the roar of the engines. A split second later, the orange car's rear tire violently burst, sending it skidding out of control. The driver fought to regain control, barely managing to avoid the barriers, but the damage was done. The red car blazed past, taking the lead in the final moments, crossing the finish line to an explosive eruption of cheers from the crowd. Kara, still casually sipping her drink, had watched the entire thing unfold. She turned her head slowly toward Arthur, raising a brow. My, you must really like the red team. Arthur leaned back in his seat, unfazed. Well, they haven't won a championship in years, or at least, that's what I think. Kara narrowed her eyes, studying him. That was definitely not fair for that driver, and extremely dangerous and reckless from you. Arthur shrugged. Relax. These cars are safe. Even in crashes, they're insanely safe for drivers. I would never harm innocents. Kara shook her head, laughing. You rigged a Formula One race just because you wanted red to win. Arthur smirked, his gaze flickering to the victorious car making its slow-down lap. That energy drink sponsor car, they just remind me of a certain team I used to hate back in my world. Kara sighed, setting her drink down. You are a menace. Arthur grinned. Maybe I am. As the victory celebrations erupted on the track, Arthur simply leaned back, enjoying his work. Arthur still savoring the victory celebrations on the track below when he noticed it. Kara clutching her head, her expression momentarily twisted in discomfort. At first, he paid it no mind. Supergirl had tanked missiles to the face, a little headache wasn't exactly alarming. But then, he saw her brows furrow deeper, her breathing slightly uneven. That was enough to make him turn. What's wrong? She hesitated. It's nothing. Arthur's gaze narrowed, immediately unconvinced. I highly doubt that. Kara exhaled, shaking her head. It's weird, but I felt like someone spoke in my head. She paused, as if processing it in real time. In my own voice. Arthur tilted his head, amusement flickering across his face. That's called your conscience talking, he said sarcastically. I know it's a rare phenomenon for some people. Kara shot him a glare. Not funny, Arthur. Arthur smirked, but the light-heartedness faded when she continued, her voice more serious. No, I mean, for a fraction of a second, I saw through someone else's eyes. Arthur's entire expression shifted. His casual demeanor disappeared, replaced with something sharper, calculating. His mind immediately ran through possibilities. Mind control? A telepath? Something even worse? Elaborate, he finally said. Kara shook her head again, frustrated. I don't know how to explain it. It was brief, like a flicker, a heartbeat, but I swear it wasn't just in my head. It was like I was inside someone else for a second. Arthur's eyes glowed faintly, his mind racing. Something was wrong. Arthur crossed his arms, watching Kara with narrowed eyes. Try focusing. See if you can do it again. Kara shut her eyes, brow furrowing as she concentrated. A few seconds passed in silence, the distant roar of F1 cars in the background. Then she sighed, opening her eyes and shaking her head. I don't think that's how it works, Arthur. Arthur exhaled through his nose, tilting his head slightly. All right, fine. Just tell me if it happens again. Kara smirked, placing her hands on her hips, chest puffed out in that signature prideful stance. Don't worry, she declared with a grin. I'm Supergirl. If there's some creepy mind stuff going on, I'll handle it. Arthur glanced at her, his expression unreadable. I have some theories, but I'll keep them to myself. The streets of Italy were nearly empty now, the night air carrying the distant echoes of laughter and faint chatter. Kara stood in front of Arthur, her blue eyes warm under the streetlights, but something lingered between them, something quiet, something unspoken. She let out a small, content sigh. I really needed this. Arthur tilted his head. A rigged race. She laughed, shaking her head. No, dumbass. Her voice softened. A night like this. It's been too long since I did something just because it felt good. No battles, no responsibilities, no world-ending threats, just fun. Just being me. Arthur smirked. I probably needed this as well, honestly. Kara shook her head, still smiling. I kinda forgot what this feels like, you know? To just be. Not Supergirl, not some hero with the weight of the world on her shoulders. Just me. Hanging out. Laughing. Being a little reckless. It felt nice. Arthur glanced at her, studying the way her eye softened as she spoke. There was something sincere in her voice, something that made him pause. Then, before he could say anything, she stepped forward. Without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Arthur stiffened for a fraction of a second before exhaling, letting himself relax. She was warm, softer than she looked, strong, but gentle. In that moment, he made a decision. I'm sorry, but I have to do this, Kara, Arthur thought to himself. His shadows flickered, imperceptible even to her sharp senses. A soldier detached from the darkness under his feet, silent and unseen, embedding itself into her own shadow. An unnoticeable guardian, one that would always watch her back, whether she knew it or not. Kara pulled back just enough to look at him, still holding onto him, her face inches from his. Arthur caught the way her eyes flickered between amusement and something else, something thoughtful. Then, she leaned in. Soft lips pressed against his cheek, fleeting but warm, before she finally stepped back, grinning at his reaction. We should do this again soon, stay out of trouble, Arthur. Before he could even react, she took off, rocketing into the sky. Arthur barely registered his own hand lifting slightly, instinctively reaching for something that was already gone. He blinked, staring at the now empty sky, his mind catching up to the moment. Then, reality hit. Wait. Silence. Then it hit him. Shit. He slowly looked around, the foreign streets eerily quiet. I'm in another damn country, and I can't fly. A long sigh left his lips as he shoved his hands into his pockets. Guess I'll just shadow exchange back. With that, the darkness at his feet swallowed him whole. Jump City, the warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mixing with the quiet hum of conversations and the distant clatter of cups against saucers. Arthur sat alone in a corner booth of a dimly lit cafe, a steaming black coffee in front of him, untouched. His gaze was distant, locked onto the TV mounted on the wall, where the news anchor was reading in her usual, rehearsed tone. After quite some time of being missing, billionaire industrialist Lex Luthor has made a public return. Officials state that despite his unexpected disappearance, no criminal charges hold against him at this time, and he remains a free man. Arthur's fingers tapped rhythmically against the wooden table, his eyes narrowing as they flickered with a faint glow. Justice League. His jaw tensed. They let him walk, again. His thoughts were a tangled mess, spiraling between the different pieces of the puzzle that refused to fit together. The Joker's last words. The exact same thing as what the Joker in the tower said before it vanished into nothingness. What did it mean? Was it a coincidence? Or was he missing something bigger? His fingers drummed faster against the table. Then there was Kara. He exhaled, leaning back in his seat, rubbing his temples. That night had been different. It was rare to let his guard down, even rarer to actually enjoy someone's company. Although that last vision she saw bothered him, but now wasn't the time to dwell on that. His gaze flicked back to the screen. Luthor was back. This world had been too calm these past few days. And a world like this? Calm never lasted. Something big was coming. He could feel it. Arthur exhaled through his nose, eyes flickering as he considered his next move. The tower or not? Going back in meant uncovering more, getting stronger. But something told him now wasn't the time. His foot tapped against the floor impatiently. Then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Arthur pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. His eyes glowed faintly as he stared at it. Well, that's new. Without hesitation, he answered. Who is this? Arthur, the voice on the other end was smooth, confident. Calculated. Arthur knew exactly who this is. You've been making quite the impression lately. Arthur leaned back in his seat, exhaling through his nose. Well, I do try to leave a mark. Let me guess they are not very fond of me in the League, and you've heard something there while you were in their custody. Luthor chuckled. Oh, you've done more than that. You destroyed my lab, ruined months. Years of research, and turned my most promising experiment into a complete disaster. Luthor paused, then continued, but to that last part, yes, they are not very fond of you, which is why I think we can reach a mutual agreement. Arthur smirked. Now you want to be my friend? You of all people? After I found you experimenting on a human. A pause. Then, Lex's voice turned sharp. Not a human, a Kryptonian. The sheer venom in those words was enough to make Arthur's eyes flicker with amusement. Lex had always been obsessed, but hearing the frustration crack through his polished exterior, that was satisfying. A moment later, Lex cleared his throat, regaining his composure. But let's not dwell on the past, shall we? What's done is done. I'm reaching out because I believe you and we might be of use to each other. Arthur remained silent, waiting. I'm offering you something that I think you might actually want. Arthur arched a brow. And what could that possibly be? Lex chuckled. Now, Arthur. That would ruin the fun. But trust me, you'll want to hear what I have to say. Arthur's fingers drummed lazily against the table. The Justice League can track this call if they want to. You do realize that? Lex scoffed. Who do you think you're talking to? If they could track me that easily, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Arthur hummed. I'll think about it. But if I want to meet you, it will be on my own terms and whenever I want. A pause. Lex's tone flattened. Arrogant bastard. Then, smoothly, fine. But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. Arthur smirked. We'll see. Click. Arthur set his phone down, staring at the dark screen. His fingers hovered over it for a moment before he let out a small exhale, leaning back into his seat. Lex Luthor, reaching out to me? Offering something I might want? Arthur scoffed, shaking his head. This is a trap. A damn good one, too. The kind with actual bait. Something real. He rubbed his jaw, eyes narrowing. Lex Luthor doesn't throw offers like that for free. He doesn't negotiate unless he thinks he's already won. Arthur let out a low chuckle, tapping his fingers against the table again. I think he hates me now on the same level as his hatred for Superman. The thought amused him more than it should have. He could practically feel Luthor's blood boiling from the other end of the call, the sheer rage he barely kept in check. Arthur grinned to himself. Good, I'll take the bait. Arthur stood up from his seat, ready to leave, when the news broadcast caught his attention. Another wave of high-profile criminals has either vanished or been taken down in brutal fashion. Reports suggest an unknown group is behind these attacks, though no official confirmation has been made. Survivors describe them as precise, methodical, and Arthur clicked his tongue, exhaling through his nose. Not my problem. He grabbed his coat and walked out, pushing through the cafe doors into the cool night air. The world was always shifting, always moving. He had his own things to deal with. Arthur stepped into what was left of Adam's office. The place was still in shambles, construction workers moving about, installing new walls, cleaning debris, and setting up replacement furniture. Sparks flew as some workers cut metal beams, the scent of fresh wooden paint lingering in the air. Arthur surveyed the damage, letting out a low chuckle. I guess me and the Titans really messed up this place, huh? Adam, sitting casually behind a makeshift desk amid the chaos, waved a hand dismissively. Now. I was planning to renovate anyway. You just expedited the process. Arthur smirked. Glad to be of service. Adam leaned back, reaching into a drawer and pulling out a small key, placing it on the table between them. Oh, yes. About that. There is place in Gotham now ready for you. It's under someone else's name, just like you asked. Arthur picked up the key, turning it between his fingers before slipping it into his pocket. Appreciate it. Adam gave him a look. It's a modest place, nothing extravagant. Arthur shrugged. Doesn't matter. As long as I can stay there for a while. Adam tapped his fingers against the desk. I'm not gonna ask why Gotham of all places, but... His voice took on a more serious tone. Do be careful. Arthur smirked. Sure, I will. Adam sighed, leaning back in his chair. That's what worries me. Arthur just chuckled, shaking his head as he turned to leave. Justice League Watchtower, emergency meeting room. The air was tense, the holographic screen surrounding the circular table flickering with reports of recent attacks, rogue factions, and the growing unrest across different cities. The Justice League had gathered, each member sitting in their designated spots, but it was clear that not everyone was at ease. Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, stood at the front of the room, arms crossed over his chest, his expression grim as he looked around at his fellow heroes. His deep voice carried a weight that made even the most seasoned members listen. The reason I didn't comply with Bruce's orders and decided to follow him. Hal started, his voice steady but carrying weight. Because of Sinestro. That got a reaction. Superman leaned forward, his fingers interlocked on the table. Sinestro? You think he's behind all this? Hal exhaled sharply. Not directly. But I've had reports from my fellow Lanterns. He's expanding his corps, looking for new candidates, spreading fear wherever he can. I suspected that what happened in our cities wasn't just some random attack. The ones we stopped. Just pawns. A heavy silence settled in the room. Diana's brow furrowed. If he's growing his ranks, then it's only a matter of time before he makes a move. Batman, standing off to the side, arms crossed, remained silent. He was thinking. Calculating. Flash, lounging slightly in his chair, tapped his fingers on the table. So you're telling me that in between Joker blowing up half a building, you and Bruce fighting Shadow Boy, and Lex strolling back into society as usual like he didn't do anything, and he will do something by the way, Clark, watch out. Flash glanced at Superman. Superman simply smiled. We also have Sinestro cooking up something in the background. Flash continued. Hal's jaw clenched. It's worse than that. The Lanterns who reported back to me, they said something was different this time. He's not just looking for strong candidates. He's searching for people who already know how to weaponize fear. People who thrive on it. And there's a rumor going around that he's found someone big. Someone dangerous. I'm not sure if it's on Earth or not. Bruce's eyes flickered at that. A name. Hal shook his head. Nothing confirmed yet. All I know that if Sinestro is personally recruiting, then we need to be ready. Superman exhaled, leaning back in his chair. One crisis at a time. Diana turned to Bruce. What's your take on that, Arthur? You think he can be one? Bruce was quiet for a moment before finally speaking. Dangerous. Smart and reckless. He knows what he's doing. But? He glanced toward Hal. Which is why I doubt he's tied to Sinestro. Hal nodded. I agree. But he's a wild card. And if Sinestro is truly looking for warriors who understand fear, then Arthur might be someone he'd want. That thought didn't sit well with anyone. Flash let out a low whistle. Man, this year just keeps getting better and better. Superman folded his arms. We need more information. On Sinestro. On his recruits. And on Arthur. He looked at Bruce. Do you think he'll make a move soon? Bruce's eyes narrowed slightly. He already has. We just don't know it yet. En route to Gotham. The sleek black car cruised along the highway, cutting through the dim glow of streetlights as the cityscape faded behind them. Inside, Arthur Blackwind sat comfortably in the back seat, his chin resting lightly on his knuckles as he gazed out the tinted window. The world outside was a blur, but inside, the mood was almost peaceful. His driver, George, an older gentleman with a refined demeanor, cleared his throat before speaking. Master Arthur, if I may be so bold. Why on earth would you choose to go to Gotham? Arthur smirked, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. You're the second person to ask me that today. Is it really that bad of a place? George paused for a moment, his gloved hand steady on the wheel. Then, with the weight of someone who had seen far too much, he simply said, well, yes. Arthur chuckled. Then it's a good thing I don't scare easily. George let out a small sigh, clearly not reassured. Even so, sir, there are far more agreeable places in the world to conduct whatever it is you intend to do. Arthur leaned back, stretching his legs slightly. I have something to take care of there. George nodded, but the question lingered. After a moment, he spoke again. And why, might I ask, did you insist on making this journey by car? A flight would have been far more efficient. Arthur smirked. Is it too much for you, George? Certainly not, Master Arthur. I always enjoy your company. There was a slight warmth in George's voice, a subtle fondness beneath the formality. Arthur grinned. Good. Then consider this quality time. George chuckled. Indeed, sir. Though, if I may, what about your academic responsibilities? Surely you haven't forgotten about school. Arthur shrugged. What about it? I'll deal with it later. George sighed again, but there was a knowing amusement behind it. Very well, Master Arthur. Very well. Arthur let his head rest against the seat, his fingers flicking in the air as he pulled up his status screen. Status window. Name, Arthur Blackwind. Job, Necromancer. Title, Bane of the Unworthy. Plus 20% attack against those who harbor evil intent. Level, 80 to 88. Fatigue, 0, HP, 7050. MP, 8700. Strength, 164 to 180. Health, 141 to 150. Agility, 135 to 150. Intelligence, 169 to 180. Sense, 100 to 113. Available ability points, 24 to 0. Passive skills. Tenacity, level 1. Insanity's Gambit. New. Grants immunity to mind control, fear, and sanity-based debuffs. Job-specific skills. Shadow Extraction. Shadow Exchange. Monarch's Domain. Combat Skills. Bloodlust, level 2. Ruler's Authority. Mutilation Sword Rush. Equipment. Omega Hardened Hide. Abyss Forged Necklace. Inventory. Amulet of Shazam's Wrath. Doomsday's Bone Gauntlets. Azarath Knight Armor Set. Greatsword of the Lowborn. Prometheum Sword. Anti-Kryptonian Blood Vial, Epic. Shattered Bolt Tower of Fate Key. Unknown Key. Arthur's eyes lingered on the unknown key for a moment. His fingers hovered over it, his mind churning with thoughts. I feel like I'm close to something, not to my actual power, but something else entirely. Then, another notification blinked across his vision. Death follows wherever you set foot. Arthur's relaxed expression hardened instantly. His eyes narrowed, glowing faintly as he stared at the words. His fingers curled slightly, the leather of the seat creaking under his grip. I got this when I first unlocked my powers, but why is it showing up now? His reflection in the window looked back at him, calm, collected, but beneath that something did bother him. Gotham. The moment they crossed the bridge into Gotham, Arthur felt it. A weight in the air. The city was drenched in gloom, like the entire place had been dipped in shadow and left to dry in misery. The sky above was an endless grey, as if the sun had given up on shining here a long time ago. The towering buildings stood tall but suffocated, choked by age, pollution, and a creeping sense of decay that clung to every brick. Raindrops dotted the windshield, faint streaks running down the glass like the city itself was crying, though no one here seemed to care. Gotham's people moved through the streets with purpose, heads down, shoulders hunched. Even the neon signs of clubs and shady businesses failed to give the streets any real life. They only illuminated the darkness, never banished it. Arthur let out a slow breath, eyes scanning the streets as the car rolled deeper into the city. He leaned back into his seat, arms crossed. I see what you meant now, George. This city is gloomy. He let his words hang in the air before adding, it feels like even the air here has given up. George, ever composed, remained focused on the road, but there was a small knowing smile on his face. Well, Master Arthur, this is Gotham. It has always been this way. He took a careful turn onto a slick, rain-soaked road. A city of contradictions, too stubborn to die, too broken to heal. A place where fear and crime have long since embedded themselves into its very foundation. Arthur hummed at that, watching as a group of men loitered in front of a convenience store, their eyes shifting toward the car with barely concealed interest. A second later, a pair of bat signal-shaped decals reflected off their faces from a passing patrol car, and they quickly turned away, pretending to be busy. George continued, voice smooth yet laced with a quiet kind of wisdom. To Batman's credit, he has done an admirable job keeping the city from plunging further into chaos. But Gotham? He shook his head. It never truly sheds its nature. Its reputation is well earned, I'm afraid. Arthur smirked. Sounds like a great place for a vacation. George chuckled softly. Indeed, sir. A fine getaway, if one enjoys the occasional mugging attempts. Arthur let out a breath through his nose, shifting his gaze to the skyline. Gotham's skyscrapers were tall, but unlike Metropolis's shining beacons of progress, these stood like jagged tombstones against the horizon. The shadows between the buildings seemed deeper, stretching just a little longer than they should. Well, Arthur said, cracking his knuckles. At least I won't be bored. George sighed, though there was an unmistakable trace of amusement in his voice. That, Master Arthur, I do not doubt in the slightest, but try to be careful. The car continued down the rain-slicked streets, carrying Arthur deeper into Gotham's embrace. The car rolled to a smooth stop in front of the estate, the soft hum of the engine fading as George put it into park. With his usual poise, he turned slightly in his seat and announced, "We have arrived, Master Arthur." Arthur stretched slightly in his seat before running a hand through his hair. That was a long road trip, but I'll admit, it was worth it. Got to see some interesting places along the way. He smirked, stepping out of the car and closing the door behind him. Then, he turned to take in the place his brother had arranged for him. And immediately, one of his eyebrows twitched. This was not modest. The estate was perched on a cliffside, overlooking Gotham's restless sea. The waves crashed against jagged rocks below, sending white mist into the air like ghostly apparitions. The building itself was an architectural masterpiece, modern yet classical, with dark stone walls, large glass windows that reflected the stormy sky, and a wraparound balcony that promised a breathtaking view of the ocean. There were tasteful exterior lights illuminating the pathways, and a small but meticulously maintained garden lined the entrance. Arthur let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head as he muttered under his breath. "Modest, you say, Adam?" George, who had stepped out of the car and was already retrieving Arthur's belongings from the trunk, smiled knowingly. It would seem Master Adam has a rather unique interpretation of the word modest, sir. Arthur exhaled through his nose, placing his hands on his hips as he looked over the estate once more. Yeah. I should have expected that. He turned his gaze toward the sea for a moment, watching as the waves roared and crashed into the rocky shore. The scent of salt filled the air, blending with the faint smell of wet earth from the earlier rain. After a beat of silence, he smirked and glanced at George. Well, if I'm going to be roaming here in Gotham, I might as well do it in style. George closed the trunk and straightened his jacket with a dignified nod. A fitting residence for someone of your stature, sir. Though, I do hope the city's unique brand of hospitality does not dampen the experience. Arthur huffed a small laugh. Oh, I highly doubt that, George. His eyes gleamed slightly. If anything, I think Gotham and I are going to get along just fine. George stood beside the sleek black car, gloved hands resting neatly in front of him, as he gave Arthur a small nod. Well then, Master Arthur, if there is nothing else, I shall take my leave and return home. Arthur, who had been inspecting the house's entrance, turned his head slightly. Where are you going? George blinked. Home, sir. Arthur scoffed, shaking his head with an amused smirk. No, You're not. George arched an eyebrow, his composed expression not faltering, but there was a subtle glint of curiosity in his eyes. So? Arthur walked back toward him, standing just a few steps away. I need someone to take care of this place while I'm gone. Make sure it doesn't fall apart, keep unwanted guests away, and more importantly. His sharp gaze met George's. Make sure my identity stays a secret while I'm here. George studied him for a moment, then let out a small, knowing sigh. I see. So, I am to be both caretaker and owner of this modest estate of yours. Arthur shrugged. You make it sound like it's a bad thing. George smiled faintly. On the contrary, sir. I find the prospect rather intriguing. He gave a small bow, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than submission. Very well, Master Arthur. I shall remain and oversee the estate in your absence. Arthur nodded, satisfied. Good. You're the only one I'd trust with this anyway. George straightened his jacket, his posture effortlessly refined. I shall consider that the highest of compliments, sir. Arthur chuckled. It was. Arthur paused, then added, also it is either you or my shadow soldiers. George, who had been adjusting his gloves, stopped momentarily and gave Arthur a puzzled look. Shadow soldiers, sir. Arthur simply gestured toward the house. Come inside. It's easier to show than explain. George regarded him for a moment, then gave a small nod, following Arthur into the grand estate. The house was vast, far from the modest place Adam had claimed it to be. A mixture of modern design and Gothic elegance, with tall windows overlooking the sea, high ceilings, and intricate architecture. But George wasn't admiring the interior. No, his attention was currently fixed on the creature standing before him. A hulking, shadowy figure loomed in the dim light of the room, its form shifting, wraith-like yet solid, glowing eyes staring at him with eerie intensity. It was undoubtedly not human. George, standing just a few feet away, merely adjusted his sleeves and let out a slow breath. I see. He observed the creature with a calm, unreadable expression. So you do have powers after all. Arthur leaned against a nearby pillar, arms crossed, watching George's reaction with mild amusement. You're way too calm about this. George tilted his head slightly, studying the shadow creature with the same air of scrutiny one might give a particularly curious work of art. Well, sir, I have seen terrible things in my lifetime. He glanced back at Arthur, his voice as composed as ever. This creature you've summoned is rather cute in comparison. Arthur blinked, then barked out a short laugh. Cute. He gestured toward the towering entity. This thing could tear through steel like paper. George gave a small shrug. And yet, it obeys you. Which makes it far less concerning than the horrors I've seen men commit in their pursuit of power. Arthur smirked, pushing off the pillar. Interesting, fair point. George glanced back at the shadow once more, then adjusted his jacket. Shall I assume there are more of these cute creatures lurking about? Arthur grinned. Oh, you have no idea. George clasped his hands behind his back, his sharp gaze lingering on the shadowy figure that loomed before him. Is this the reason you came to Gotham, sir? His tone was thoughtful. To fight crime with these creatures? Like the heroes you once admired as a child. Arthur let out a laugh, low, amused, and carrying a touch of disbelief. Oh, no. Definitely not. I won't be doing that. From the depths of the shadows, a new figure emerged. A hunched, wiry silhouette stepped forward, its presence unnerving yet distinctly weaker than Arthur's usual summons. Unlike his other soldiers, this one was different. And it had a wide, unsettling grin. Arthur's grin mirrored it. This guy will. George's brow furrowed as he examined the shadowed figure. There was something eerily familiar about it. He tilted his head slightly. This shadow, it bears a resemblance to. His voice trailed off. Arthur clapped a hand on George's shoulder, his smirk widening. Oh, you have no idea how ironic this is. Normal grade shadow solid a name, low ranked can't be named. Then, turning his attention back to the shadow, Arthur waved his hand lazily. I can't name you yet, but that doesn't really matter. His voice dropped into something more commanding. Go. Stick to the shadows of this city, avoid being seen. Fight crime however you see fit. Avoid killing small fries, but as for the so-called supervillains of this shithole. He smirked. Do whatever you want. The shadow tilted its head, the eerie grin stretching wider before it sank into the darkness. George watched in silence for a moment before exhaling slowly. A rather poetic choice, I must say. Arthur chuckled. Poetic? No. He placed his hands in his pockets, looking toward the Gotham skyline beyond the windows. I'd call it justice. Gotham at night was a beast with 1,000 eye street lamps flickering, neon signs buzzing, shadows stretching long and hungry. For the lowlifes that slithered through its back alleys, it was business as usual. A group of thugs, 4 of them, leather jackets, scarred knuckles, and bad intentions stood around a crate, counting their latest earnings. Probably from a robbery, maybe some drug money. It didn't matter. One of them, a rat-faced guy with a crooked nose, perked up. Yo? You'll hear that? The others paused, listening. Then it came. Laughter. Not just any laughter, a cackle that sent an icy shiver up the spine. Familiar, twisted, wrong. Another thug, taller with a buzz cut, squinted down the alley. The dim streetlight barely cut through the fog rolling in from the docks, but something was there, a figure in the dark. A wide grin. Glowing violet eyes. And something else, a swirling black mist curling off its body like smoke. Rat-Face took a step back, his breath hitching. No. No, that ain't possible. We saw that bastard in the news die. Buzzcut swallowed. Then what the hell is that? The figure took a step forward. The light caught him. A ghastly, distorted version of a face they all knew. A face that shouldn't be here. Pale, stretched into a ghoulish smile. But it wasn't just his face, it was his whole body, twisted, unnatural, black as night. A shadow. The Joker. No, something wearing his grin. Rat-Face stumbled backward, bumping into the crate. No, no, no. Damn this. The others bolted, but they didn't get far. The thing moved too fast. Before one of them could even reach the mouth of the alley, it lashed out, wrapping around him and yanking him back with bone-snapping force. He hit the pavement, screaming. The Joker shadow pounced. The first punch sent teeth flying. The second left a dent in the concrete beneath the thug's head. He laughed, a chaotic, broken sound, as if his voice couldn't decide whether to be human or something else entirely. Buzzcut pulled a gun, hands shaking. Nope. Damn this. I ain't fighting no ghost. He aimed, and the thing was already in his face. It grabbed his wrist, bones cracked. The gun dropped. Before he could scream, it smashed his head against the wall. Hard. Blood smeared the bricks. He slumped, unconscious. The last thug, Rat-Face, was frozen, wide-eyed, staring at the monster before him. You? He trembled. You ain't him. The Joker shadow tilted its head, like a predator considering its prey. Then, slowly, its grin widened. Rat-Face ran. And the laughter followed. The dining room was dimly lit, elegant but not excessive. A long table stretched between Arthur and George, though Arthur had chosen to sit closer rather than at the head like some noble lord. Outside, the sea whispered against the cliffs, a rhythmic backdrop to their meal. George, ever the proper gentleman, sliced into his steak with precision, but his gaze flicked toward Arthur between bites. Finally, he spoke. "Master Arthur, your Joker Shadow has been absent for quite some time now." He set his utensils down with a measured clink. "Do you believe it is carrying out your request?" Arthur smirked, swirling the wine in his glass before taking a sip. "Oh, he's doing it. All right." George exhaled, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "I must admit, I fail to comprehend why you even bother with this charade." Arthur leaned back in his chair, tapping his fork against the plate, his grin widening. "It's simple, really." He set the fork down and rested his chin on his palm. "I just happen to be the reason Batman's boyfriend died." George's expression didn't shift, but the subtle arch of his brow spoke volumes. Arthur chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm just keeping him busy. That's all. Because, let's be honest, isn't it a little weird? I took out the Joker, his arch-nemesis, and what did Batman do so far?" He gestured vaguely. "Absolutely nothing." He took another bite, chewing thoughtfully before adding, "That either means he's still planning something, a way to neutralize me." He pointed his knife at George. "Or he realizes I was in the right, or he doesn't really care." He shrugged. "I really don't know which one is worse when it comes to that man." George exhaled through his nose, lifting his glass of wine. "Gotham is a city of mysteries, Master Arthur. Its people even more so. Whatever the case may be, I do hope this experiment of yours does not escalate beyond what you can control." Arthur smirked. "Oh, George." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming with mischief. "I never really had control in the first place, I just do things." Metropolis? In the highest floors of LexCorp Tower, beyond layers of security, surveillance, and reinforced walls, Lex Luthor sat in his private office, watching. The large display before him glowed with Arthur Blackwind's face, cycling through satellite captures, enhanced footage, and data streams compiled from every available source. The boy was an anomaly, something beyond meta-human, beyond alien. Lex had met gods. Lex had defied them. And yet, Arthur Blackwind was something else entirely. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, analyzing every detail. His past was fragmented, his abilities undocumented. Yet undeniable. He had crushed the Joker like an insect. Survived encounters with a Kryptonian and his prized Project Doomsday. Wielded power that defied Lex's understanding, and that simply would not do. Lex reached for the small, vacuum-sealed evidence bag on his desk. Inside, delicate strands of ashen-white hair rested, barely visible against the surface. Arthur's hair. A trophy. A key. A revelation. Lex smiled. "You're fascinating, Arthur." He turned the bag between his fingers, watching the strands shift ever so slightly. "But power like yours? It was never meant to be held by just one man." He placed the bag down gently, tapping a button on his desk. Multiple displays flickered to life, schematics appearing, DNA sequencing, energy resonance studies, genetic recombination models. "You're young. Arrogant. Powerful." Lex's voice was smooth, controlled, but laced with satisfaction. But most importantly, he traced a finger across Arthur's image. "You're predictable." He had witnessed what the boy could do. He had already begun formulating the possibilities. And all that was left was for Arthur to take the bait. Lex leaned back, exhaling slowly. His expression sharpened, the calculation behind his eyes unmistakable. Your power won't be just yours anymore, Arthur. He chuckled, low and knowing. Not for long, once I crack this little mystery. The large screen on Lex Luthor's wall flickered, shifting from Arthur Blackwind's profile to something equally intriguing. Another footage. The image was grainy but unmistakable. Blonde hair whipping in the wind, streaking through the skies like a missile, then impact. A foreign military installation obliterated. The footage rewound, showing the girl cutting through reinforced structures like they were paper. Soldiers, scientists, assets all reduced to nothing but rubble. Lex raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh. A second report followed. Another site, another strike. Then another. He leaned forward, fingers tapping against his desk as he watched her work. Destroying scientific facilities, military compounds. His eyes narrowed slightly before a slow smirk curled his lips. Interesting, here she was, acting with ruthless precision. And not just against threats, against metahumans. He exhaled, amused. So, she's operational already. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't her personal mission. No, this was sanctioned. Controlled. A weapon. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I see. She wasn't just cleaning up threats. She was eliminating individuals outside government control. Lex already knew what was going on. The government had always been paranoid about metahumans. No matter how many alliances were formed, governments feared what they couldn't control. And now? They had their enforcer. Lex chuckled, shaking his head. Well, how predictable, but to use them in the open like this. His gaze shifted, falling on the vacuum-sealed bag resting on his desk. Arthur Blackwind's hair gleamed under the soft light. He picked it up between his fingers, examining it carefully, a devilish glint in his eyes. Maybe, he mused, rolling the strands between his fingertips, I should work with them again, one final time. The smirk widened. Just to see how this all plays out. The morning sun barely peeked through Gotham's ever-present gloom as Arthur Blackwind stood in an empty lot near his home, stretching his arms with a satisfied sigh. His daily quest was done, and at this point, it was light work, a formality rather than a challenge. The rewards barely made a dent in his strength anymore. But then, a new notification flashed before his eyes. Arthur had barely materialized inside his room when a familiar blue screen popped up in front of his face. System alert, level 90 reached, requirements fulfilled. The unknown key can now be used to unlock a dungeon. Details will be revealed once you reach the target location. Target location, Titan's Tower, Jump City. Arthur blinked once. Then twice. Then he let out the most exhausted sigh known to mankind, rubbing his temples as if the sheer audacity of the system was giving him a migraine. You've got to be kidding me. His voice was flat, but the sheer exasperation in his eyes could burn a hole through the notification screen. Of all places, of all goddamn places in the world, why Titan's Tower? He threw his hands up, pacing the room. Now I have to infiltrate? Great. Because that's exactly what I needed in my life right now. Breaking and entering into the home of a bunch of people who already do not exactly like me. He dropped onto his bed, running a hand down his face. I'm not exactly welcome there, system. He said it slow, as if talking to an idiotic intern that didn't quite understand how social consequences worked. The system, of course, offered no response. Arthur groaned. I swear, I think you're doing this just to mess with me. Arthur's brow furrowed. He pulled out the key from his inventory, rolling it between his fingers. It was still just as unassuming as before, the dark metal, smooth to the touch, yet cold like it didn't belong in this world. And yet, System message. The key's name remains till you reach target location. Arthur chuckled. I can use it now, but you still won't tell me what the hell this key actually is or where it leads. Nature of this dungeon. His fingers tightened around the object as a slow smirk tugged at his lips. Interesting. It feels different from the Tower of Fate's key. Like it's something else entirely. His mind whirred with possibilities, but the excitement was clear on his face. Arthur stepped into his home, shaking off the cold from the outside. The place was quiet. George had ensured that no unnecessary staff was around. Just them and the secrets of Gotham. Inside the dining room, George was already waiting, reading a newspaper while sipping on black coffee in a pristine porcelain cup. He glanced up, eyes sharp despite his calm demeanor. I see you finished your training session. You're back early, Master Arthur. He folded the newspaper neatly and set it aside. Did the city not provide enough entertainment? Arthur smirked, pulling out a chair and dropping into it. Let's just say I found something more interesting. George raised an eyebrow, waiting. Arthur spun the key between his fingers, watching how the morning light reflected off it. I'll be leaving today. George didn't flinch, simply tilting his head. For how long? Arthur exhaled through his nose, staring at the key as if he could force it to reveal its secrets. Finally, he admitted, I honestly don't know. A moment of silence. George observed him carefully, then placed his cup down with a soft clink. I see. He adjusted his tie, looking completely unfazed. Then I assume you've taken the necessary precautions. Arthur chuckled. Come on, George. Have a little faith. I know what I'm doing. George sighed, rubbing his temple. Master Arthur, faith is for men who don't have plans. I trust you, yes, but I would rather trust that you've prepared accordingly. Arthur leaned back, arms behind his head. I have. His grin widened. Well, mostly. George pinched the bridge of his nose. That is not reassuring in the slightest. Arthur stood, tossing the key into the air and catching it. It wasn't meant to be. He gave George a sharp look. Just keep an eye on things while I'm gone. If anything happens, use my shadows, they will obey you. George sighed but gave a small nod. Of course, sir. Then, a knowing look crossed his face. And what about your Gotham plan? Arthur's smirk deepened. He didn't answer directly, just glanced out the window, where the city's dark skyline loomed in the distance. The Joker's shadow was still out there, doing exactly what Arthur instructed. Arthur grabbed his coat and stepped toward the door. The key pulsed faintly in his grasp. George, standing near the entrance, watched him carefully. Then, with a subtle smirk, he said, Do try not to disappear entirely, Master Arthur. Arthur laughed. Relax. I'll be back before you even miss me. Arthur adjusted his coat, rolling his shoulders like he was getting ready for a casual stroll instead of stepping into something potentially life-threatening. George, ever composed, watched him with a look of measured patience, like a butler preparing for yet another one of his master's reckless adventures. Arthur exhaled and casually said, All right then. Exchange. In an instant, his body was engulfed in shadow, sucked into the ground like ink spilling into water. And just as quickly something else took his place. A hulking, inky black shadow demon stood where Arthur had been, its glowing eyes staring straight at George. Its form flickered like smoke, but its sheer size made the room feel much smaller than it actually was. For a long, long second, there was nothing but silence. George, completely unfazed, blinked once and adjusted his cufflinks. Then, in the same calm, dignified tone he used for everything else, he simply said, Oh. He gave the creature a once-over. Hello. The shadow demon tilted its head like a confused dog. George, still as composed as ever, gestured toward the dining table. "I assume you don't partake in coffee?" The shadow creature let out a deep, guttural growl that rumbled the floor beneath them. George nodded, completely unbothered. "Yes, I thought as much." He picked up his newspaper again and went back to reading, as if a shadow monster standing in the room was just another Tuesday. Jump City. Arthur stepped out of the shadows, now back in Jump City. The familiar skyline stretched before him, the dim glow of streetlights casting long shadows against the towering buildings. And off in the distance, standing like a monument, was Titan's Tower. Arthur exhaled through his nose, crossing his arms. "It would have been way easier if I had just assigned a shadow soldier to one of the Titans," he muttered, his gaze locked on the distant T-shaped fortress. Could have had eyes and ears inside by now. But no, he never did. And for good reason. His blue eyes flickered as he remembered that Raven had been the first to sense his powers, long before he even made a move. She'd sniff them out. Probably exorcise or something on the spot, too. "I need to test that out though. It will give me some insights about certain magic users." His lips twitched at the thought of watching his carefully planted spy get blasted into oblivion by a pissed-off half-demon. Arthur rubbed the back of his head, weighing his options. He could try to be subtle. Sneak in. Use the shadows, avoid confrontation. And access the dungeon. Minimize risk. But after a solid 5 seconds of pretending he had patience, he sighed. "Ah, damn it." He cracked his neck, shaking off the tension. "I'll just go ahead and waltz in like nothing happened." His lips curled into a grin, equal parts cocky and suicidal. No plan. No backup. Just confidence and bad decisions. Arthur stood at the edge of the shore, staring at the tower of his so-called peers with mild annoyance. It loomed like a monument of past troubles, a place where he was neither welcome nor forgotten. He let out a long breath. "All right, here goes nothing." With a flicker of motion, he vanished. His body blurred across the ground, moving like a ghost cutting through the night. Every step barely touched the surface, leaving behind faint ripples as he closed in on the tower's perimeter. But then, his instinct screamed. Arthur's stride shifted, his boots slamming against solid ground as he abruptly halted. His head tilted slightly, sensing it. A presence. Nearby. Slowly, his gaze lifted. And there she was. Raven. Floating just above the tower, shrouded in a midnight cloak, a hood partially drawn over her face. She sat suspended in the air, legs crossed in meditation, her violet eyes barely open, glowing faintly in the dark. The wind shifted, rustling the edges of her cloak. Arthur clicked his tongue. TCH. Of course, it had to be her. Arthur Blackwind walked toward the Titan's tower as if he belonged there. His strides were slow, casual, almost lazy. But beneath the nonchalant exterior, every step was calculated. His senses stretched out like invisible tendrils, brushing against the energies around him, taking in every detail. The wind, the city's distant hum, the faint heartbeat of the tower itself, and naturally the meditating Raven on top of it. And then above. Before he could react, violet eyes snapped open. The air shifted. Whoosh, Raven moved. One moment, she was floating in the night, legs crossed in quiet meditation. The next, she was right in front of him, standing mere feet away, her cloak billowing slightly from the sudden teleportation. "You're a long way from Gotham." Her voice was even, controlled, but there was a sharp edge to it, like a blade just barely concealed. She wasn't surprised to see him. She had felt him coming. Arthur narrowed his eyes slightly. "Raven." His voice held neither fear nor hesitation. Just acknowledgement. Her gaze studied him, searching. She wasn't foolish enough to assume he was here on a friendly visit. The last time they saw each other, things hadn't been peaceful in the city. But instead of pressing him immediately, Raven tilted her head slightly and, unsurprisingly, said, "Relax. I don't share everything with the team." Arthur's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Keep it that way. I really don't want to see you as an enemy." A flicker of blue light ran through his irises, something deep and untamed stirring beneath his skin. His power thrummed beneath the surface, coiled like a beast waiting to be unleashed. He wasn't suppressing it, not completely. And Raven could feel it. Her expression barely shifted, but the tension in the air thickened. "You're stronger." Her words weren't a compliment. They were a fact. An observation made with quiet, unwavering certainty. Arthur, ever the smooth talker, feigned mild surprise. "Naturally. And how do you figure that out?" Raven's violet eyes bore into him, unamused. "Because you feel even more wrong." Ouch. Arthur placed a hand over his chest mockingly. "That's harsh." Raven didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she elaborated in that calm, measured tone of hers. "Before, your power felt unsteady. Like it wasn't fully yours yet. Now, it's different. Denser. Colder. Like something has shifted inside you." Arthur rolled his shoulders, as if shaking off the weight of her words. "I just had a good training arc." She didn't respond. Didn't need to. Her expression made it clear she wasn't buying his deflections. Then, Arthur did something bold. He walked past her. Not aggressively, not threateningly, just casually, like she wasn't even a roadblock. Like he had every right to be here. Raven's eyebrow twitched slightly, and she turned, watching him. "You do realize you're not exactly going to be welcomed with open arms." Arthur didn't stop. "I had a feeling." She took a step forward, voice as calm as ever, but with an unmistakable hint of warning. Robin came back with a broken leg and bruises all over. That made Arthur pause for half a second. Raven noticed. "You're after something, aren't you?" Arthur turned his head slightly, his sharp blue eyes meeting hers. The way she phrased it, it wasn't a question. It was a statement. Arthur smirked. "What if I ask nicely?" Raven exhaled softly, crossing her arms. "Somehow, I doubt that's going to make a difference with the others." Arthur chuckled, his gaze flicking toward the tower's entrance. "Guess we'll find out." A deep rumble filled the air as the ground trembled beneath Arthur's feet. Before he could take another step, massive slabs of rock shot up from the earth, rising like a barricade, standing tall between him and the tower. The movement was precise, controlled. This wasn't some casual warning. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Then, instead of looking annoyed, he just smiled. With a flick of his fingers, a pulse of invisible force rippled outward. Crack! Boom! The barrier shattered into dust, the massive chunks of rock hurled away effortlessly as if they weighed nothing at all. The debris didn't even touch the ground, they simply vanished, erased from existence by Arthur's ruler's authority. His gaze flicked to Raven, his smirk widening slightly. "Really? That's how we're playing it?" She didn't answer. Instead she attacked. Boom! A bolt of dark, crackling energy shot toward him with terrifying speed. Arthur barely had time to tilt his head as the blast roared past his face, searing the air where he had just stood. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. No warning. No words. She was pissed. And she wasn't holding back. Another blast, then another, then another. The night lit up with purple streaks of energy as Raven unleashed an onslaught of shadowy projectiles, each one precise, deadly, and filled with something more than just power. Arthur exhaled, his smirk fading. Cheeing. A sleek, black Promethean blade slid free from his system inventory, gleaming under the dim moonlight. His grip was effortless, almost relaxed, until he moved. Clang! The first blast met the sword's edge and split in half, the raw energy scattering harmlessly to the side. Clang! 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 He deflected each strike with ease, his free hand casually flicking his fingers, redirecting, stopping, erasing the stray energy bolts mid-air with ruler's authority. It was as if the very air bent to his will. But as he parried, something caught his attention. Her attacks weren't just fast, they were furious. Raven's face was still a mask of control, but her eyes, they burned. Not with their usual violet glow, but with something darker. Arthur narrowed his eyes, watching her closely. Something was off. She sent a final, larger blast straight at him, but this time, he didn't dodge. Instead, he closed the distance. Whoosh! His body blurred through the air, shadows twisting around his form as he shot forward like a bullet. Before Raven could react, grab. Arthur's hand caught hers mid-air, his grip firm but not crushing. They hovered above the ground, the wind rustling around them, tension thick in the air. What is going on with you? Arthur's voice was low, edged with something that almost sounded like concern. Raven's eyes flickered, her expression unreadable, but she didn't pull away. Let go, Arthur! Her tone was calm, but it lacked its usual cool detachment. Arthur didn't move, his face close to hers. You're clearly keeping something to yourself. What's wrong? For the first time, she hesitated. Then just for a split second her eyes snapped red. Arthur noticed. His grip loosened instantly, and she yanked her hand away, clutching her head. A sharp gasp left her lips as she staggered, her fingers pressing against her temple like she was trying to silence something. Arthur's eyes narrowed. He had seen it. Just for a moment. But it was enough. Raven. She didn't respond. Didn't even look at him. Arthur exhaled slowly, stepping back as they both landed on solid ground. He watched her closely, analyzing her every movement. Raven barely had time to steady herself before grab. Arthur's hands clamped down on her shoulders, firm but not forceful. His eyes burned an eerie, glowing blue, cutting through the darkness between them. His gaze was that of understanding. And when he spoke, his voice carried something Raven hadn't expected. Certainty. It's your father, Trigon, isn't it? Raven's breath hitched. No, that wasn't possible. Her eyes widened slightly, her entire body going rigid under his grip. No. Wait. She shook her head, confused. How did he? Her voice dropped to something almost defensive. How did you know that? Arthur's expression didn't change. He just kept staring, his grip not loosening. His voice was even, almost casual, except for the razor-sharp edge beneath it. You were attacking me out of frustration about something, he said, tilting his head slightly. But your attacks got a little too lethal. Raven flinched at that. If I were some random thug. Hell, if I was weaker I'd be dead right now. No, Raven protested quickly, as if trying to dismiss the idea. I wouldn't, Arthur cut her off, his tone growing just a little more pointed. Are you losing control over Trigon? He let that sink in before adding, that's a little bit serious, don't you think? Raven clenched her jaw, looking away. Is there a reason for that? Arthur pressed. You're someone who's always so composed. Always keeping your emotions in check. So why now? She said nothing. But the way her eyes started darting everywhere, avoiding his gaze, avoiding the question, told him everything he needed to know. Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly. His grip on her shoulders tightened just a fraction. And then he said it. "Don't tell me this is about me." Raven's head snapped up so fast it was a miracle she didn't get whiplash. Her entire face erupted into deep, burning red. Not just a little blush, full-on, fire alarm level embarrassment. "No." She blurted out, way too loud, way too fast. Arthur just nodded. A slow, deliberate, knowing nod. "Yes." Raven groaned, her hands flying to her face. "No." "Yes." "No." "Yes." She groaned harder, face-palming herself with a level of exasperation that could probably crack the multiverse. Arthur just smirked. "Wow. You must really hate being this predictable." Raven sighed deeply, like she was about to throw herself into another dimension just to escape this conversation. But when she finally spoke, her voice was low. "I'm not allowed to feel deeply," she admitted. "Anger, frustration." She exhaled, shaking her head slightly. "And even jealousy." She hesitated for half a second before forcing the last word out, as if saying it physically hurt. Arthur just watched her, his smile fading slightly. "These are things he feeds on to weaken me." Her voice was quieter now. "Not weak. Not scared. Just tired." Arthur finally let her go, his grip loosening as he took a slow step back. His glowing eyes dimmed, fading into their usual blue. But his smirk? That stayed firmly in place. "Damn," he muttered, stretching his neck with an easy roll of his shoulders. "I knew you were interested in me, but I didn't think it was this serious." He raised an eyebrow, his voice teasing but laced with genuine curiosity. "I mean, I didn't think I'd have to start dodging death beams because of it." Raven froze. Then, very slowly, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Oh my God." Arthur grinned. "Oh my God," she repeated, her voice tighter this time, as if she was physically fighting the urge to hurl him into another dimension. "I mean, don't get me wrong," Arthur continued, ignoring the warning signs of imminent doom. "I get it. I'm devastatingly charming. It happens." Raven inhaled through her nose, very deliberately. "Arthur. And let's be real, you do spend a lot of time looking at me when you think I don't notice." He tapped his chin, mock thoughtful. "It's cute, really." Raven closed her eyes. "Arthur. But, man, jealousy? Didn't expect that from you." He clicked his tongue, shaking his head. "I must have done something right." That was it. Raven snapped. "I am not jealous." Her cloak flared around her as raw, violet energy erupted from her body, crackling through the air in a wave of frustration. A nearby streetlight exploded, shattering into pieces. Arthur just laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a worried laugh. A full, smug, entertained as hell laugh. Raven groaned into her hands. "You are the worst person I have ever met." Arthur wiped a non-existent tear from his eye, still chuckling. "And yet, here we are. You, losing control over your emotions. Me, still standing. You sure you don't want to admit something?" She refused to look at him. Arthur smirked, tilting his head. "Raven. Shut up. Say it. Shut up." Arthur just smiled wider. "I'll take that as a maybe." He put his hands up in mock surrender, still grinning like he had all the time in the world. All right. I should stop teasing you, otherwise, I might end up fighting a red demon right here, right now." He smirked, his tone light, but his next words carried weight. "And honestly, I'm not exactly sure I'm ready to go toe-to-toe with something like that just yet." Raven froze. For a second, Everything was silent. The wind, the distant sounds of the city, everything faded into the background. Then, a sharp pull. Arthur's eyes widened as he felt her hands grip his clothes from behind, her voice suddenly too close. "How do you know about my father?" The question wasn't loud. But damn if it didn't carry the weight of 1,000 unspoken things. Her breath was just the faintest whisper against his back, and for once, her tone wasn't calm. It was low, controlled, but underneath it, there was something else. Arthur's smirk faltered, just for a split second. Then, he let out a small chuckle, tilting his head slightly. "You're not the only one with access to certain data about people." His voice was smooth, effortless, like he hadn't just pulled that lie out of thin air. Raven didn't move. Didn't let go. But he felt her eyes narrow. "Right," she murmured, her voice unreadable. "And I suppose you just happened to come across that particular bit of information." Arthur grinned, twisting his head just enough to glance at her over his shoulder. "Let's just say I like to keep my ear to the ground." Raven held her stare for a moment longer. Then, slowly, she let go of him. Arthur turned fully, and slipping into his pockets as he rocked on his heels. "Come on now, Raven." His smirk returned, playful but intentional. "Get me inside the tower. I'm not here for trouble." Raven's violet gaze flicked up to his. Her expression betrayed nothing. But then, she sighed. "TTCH." She crossed her arms. "I should leave you outside just for being annoying." Arthur grinned wider. "You are not gonna do that to your dearest." She rolled her eyes, but the tension in her shoulders finally loosened. Dark energy swirled around them. "Don't make me regret this." Arthur gave her a lazy salute. "You won't." Raven didn't say another word. Instead, she flicked her wrist, and a swirling black portal tore through the air, dark and ethereal, crackling with energy. Arthur raised an eyebrow but didn't hesitate. "Thanks," he mused before stepping inside. Raven followed. A moment later, they were inside the Titan's tower. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. The air was still, yet the walls hummed faintly with hidden security systems. The soft glow of the tower's advanced technology cast faint blue lights across the polished floor. Arthur exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "Can't say I missed this place, not like I spent that much time here." Then pulse. Arthur felt it immediately. Something inside his system inventory started thrumming, a faint but insistent beat, like a pulse in the fabric of reality itself. He reached for it. The key. As soon as he pulled it out, the mysterious, dark metal key pulsed again in his palm. Faint, glowing inscriptions slithered across its surface, disappearing before the eye could properly register them. It felt alive, sensing something. The doorway to the dungeon was close. Arthur frowned slightly. "I wonder what kind of dungeon it's gonna be." Before he could shove it back into his inventory, "What is that?" Arthur's gaze flicked up. Raven was staring. Her violet eyes were locked onto the key, brows furrowed in curiosity, and something else. Arthur didn't even blink. "Just something," he said casually, closing his fingers around it. Raven narrowed her eyes. "Arthur." Her voice was flat. He smirked. "That's my name." She folded her arms. "Will you ever be honest about anything?" Arthur let out a short chuckle, spinning the key once before making it disappear back into his inventory. "There's a reason I keep certain things to myself," he said, his voice calm, steady. "Just trust me." Raven stared at him. Then, without warning, Arthur leaned in, close enough that she could feel his breath against her ear. "Just like I know you were spying on me while I was with Kara in Italy." Raven froze. Arthur's smirk grew. "But I kept it to myself." Her face turned red. Like, comically red. Her eyes widened just a fraction, and she instinctively took a half step back, but it was too late. The damage was done. What? She managed. Arthur chuckled, his sharp blue gaze glinting. It's easy to detect you, Raven. Just like you can detect me. She clenched her fists, looking anywhere but at him. Arthur took one more step back, hands in his pockets, looking way too amused. Fear not, he added smoothly. Your secret is in safe hands. Raven groaned into her palm, clearly wanting the earth to swallow her whole. Arthur and Raven walked side by side. The neon blue glow from the hallway panels cast soft shadows on the floor, but despite the futuristic setting, the atmosphere between them was strangely awkward. Raven, of course, wasn't the type to fidget. But right now, she was definitely fidgeting. Her hands were clasped behind her back, and she kept glancing at Arthur from the corner of her eye, like she was debating something. Arthur, on the other hand, was just casually strolling, hands in his pockets, acting like he owned the place despite technically being an intruder and not exactly someone they would like to see. Finally, Raven broke the silence. So, Kara. Arthur arched a brow, glancing at her. What about her? Raven hesitated for half a second, then shrugged, like she was totally not overthinking this. How did you two meet? Arthur smirked. Jealous? Her face immediately darkened. I can still teleport you to the bottom of the ocean. Arthur chuckled, shaking his head. I mean, I can survive that, but all right. No need to get murdery. I saved her life, kind of. Raven blinked. Kind of. Arthur waved a hand. Long story. You probably already know half of it from the Justice League. That answer wasn't nearly enough for Raven. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. And? Arthur let out a small sigh. And I might have unintentionally promised her something. Raven stopped walking, staring at him. What did you promise? Arthur scratched the back of his head, looking very uninterested in answering that. It's complicated. Raven, however, completely ignored his attempt to change the subject. Instead, she hit him with a different question entirely. Do you like her? Arthur glanced at her, caught slightly off guard by the directness. He opened his mouth, then he felt it. His instincts flared. They weren't alone. Arthur stopped mid-step, gaze sharpening as he shifted his focus down the hall. Raven noticed immediately. It's the others, follow me. Arthur didn't answer. Instead, he just started walking forward. Straight toward the two figures waiting ahead. Jamie stood near a security console, his glowing blue eyes narrowing the moment he spotted Arthur. Beside him, Beast Boy was mid-conversation, but the second he turned and saw who was approaching, his green eyes went wide. Oh boy, Beast Boy muttered, ears perking up. Jamie? Is that who I think it is? Jamie tensed. The scarab on his back buzzed with activity, its mechanical voice whispering something in his head. He didn't even need it to tell him the obvious, this was bad news. Arthur, however? He didn't sneak, didn't hide, didn't hesitate. He just walked straight up to them. Like he belonged here. Like this wasn't an issue at all. Beast Boy and Blue Beetle both froze when they spotted Arthur approaching. Jamie's scarab reacted instantly. With a flash of blue energy, his armor snapped into place, sleek and menacing. Weapons hummed to life, sharp blasters forming around his arms as he aimed directly at Arthur. What are you doing here? Jamie demanded, voice edged with suspicion. The scarab's glowing eyes locked onto Arthur like a predator locking onto prey. Arthur raised his hands in mock surrender, a cocky smirk tugging at his lips. Easy there, Iron Man Jr., I'm just here for a tour. Jamie! Raven tried to interject, but Arthur had already closed the distance. I said, what are you doing here? Jamie's tone hardened. The scarab hummed louder, energy spikes crackling at his fingertips. Beast Boy, still leaning against the wall, immediately stepped in with a nervous chuckle. Whoa, chill, man. He's not throwing punches, so maybe don't attack him yet. He shifted into a green Labrador and padded between them, wagging his tail. Let's not blow holes in the tower today, huh? Arthur tilted his head. See? Even our green friend thinks you're overreacting. Jamie's blasters flared brighter. Don't push me. Or what? Arthur's smirk sharpened, his doomsday bone gauntlet subtly forming beneath his sleeves, hidden from view. You gonna shoot first, ask questions later? I thought you hero types were more patient. Raven finally reached them, her hand brushing Arthur's arm as if she could physically hold him back. Arthur, stop it, she said, her voice low and urgent. You're not helping. Relax, I'm just messing with him, Arthur said smoothly, though his stance never shifted. Didn't realize guest hospitality was this aggressive. Beast Boy shifted back to human form, throwing an arm around Jamie's shoulders in an exaggerated bro hug. Come on, man. If he wanted a fight, he wouldn't walk up with Raven here. Plus, I'm getting Zero's evil mastermind vibes here. More. Smug pain in the ass. Arthur chuckled. Finally, someone with a good read on me. Jamie's visor dimmed slightly, though his weapons didn't lower. Why are you really here? Arthur shrugged. Just passing through. Needed to talk to someone. His gaze slid sideways to Raven for a brief second, just long enough for Jamie to catch it. Talk to someone, huh? Beast Boy wiggled his eyebrows. I knew it all along, Raven. I don't mind seeing Arthur around from now on, but what would the others think? Especially, well, you know. Robin. Arthur laughed while Raven groaned audibly, covering her face with one hand. It's not what you think. Raven started, but Arthur cut her off. MHM, he said, throwing in a playful wink. Beast Boy howled with laughter while Jamie just muttered under his breath, I'm gonna regret not blasting you, aren't I? Most likely, Arthur quipped. But hey, at least you didn't shoot first, but if last time wasn't enough for you, we can always try again. Arthur's smirk deepened as he caught the tension still hanging in the air. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, just long enough to feel the pulse of his own power thrumming beneath the surface. When he opened them again, his irises glowed with an eerie, blue light, a quiet storm brewing behind them. You're alone here, aren't you? He said, voice low and smooth. Beast Boy's laughter cut off in an instant. Both he and Jamie stiffened, exchanging a quick glance. The kind that screamed, how the hell does he know that? Jamie's scarab flared in response, energy crackling faintly along his gauntlets. What's it to you? Arthur didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked unbothered, unhurried until he was close enough to slap a hand onto Beast Boy's shoulder. No hard feelings, he said casually, giving Gar a light pat. My bad for going too hard on you guys last time. I'm not usually that rough, unless asked. He tossed a wink toward Raven's direction, earning a visible facepalm from her. Beast Boy blinked, his mouth half open. Thanks? I think? Whatever awkward quip Gar was about to fire back was cut off by Jamie snapping. All right, enough of you mocking us. Jamie growled, his armor humming as the scarab shifted into attack mode. Blades unfolded from his arms, glowing with energy. If you've got this much mouth, let's see if you can back it up. Fight me. Now. Arthur sighed, lifting his hand lazily. If you insist. With a flick of his wrist, Ruler's authority surged to life. An invisible force crashed into Jamie like a freight train, yanking him clean off the ground and pinning him midair. The hell? Jamie struggled, his limbs locked tight as the scarab whirred in protest. He tried to activate his weapons, but Arthur's control twisted tighter, binding his hands behind his back like invisible chains. Wow, Arthur mused, tilting his head. And here I thought you were gonna be a challenge. You ass, language, Arthur cut in smoothly. Beast Boy took a cautious step back, eyes darting between them. Guys? Maybe we don't turn the living room into a battle arena? I just got comfy. Let me go. Jamie snapped, his armor flaring as he tried to break free. But Arthur barely twitched, keeping the hold firm. You sure? Arthur teased. Enough. Raven's voice cut through the tension like a whip, the air around her rippling with power. She stepped between them, her dark cloak flaring as her glowing eyes locked onto Arthur's. Let him go. For a moment, the room hung in silence, electric and sharp. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, Arthur released his hold. Jamie dropped back to the floor with a heavy thud, cursing under his breath as he stumbled upright. Fine. Arthur dusted off his hands like he'd just finished taking out the trash. It's a waste of time anyway. Jamie took a threatening step forward, but Beast Boy yanked him back by the arm. Dude, don't. I like having a face, and I'd like to keep it in one piece, please. Arthur chuckled, turning on his heel like nothing had happened. Smartest thing anyone said all day. Raven, still watching him carefully, let out a breath. You're impossible, you promised not to make trouble. Arthur glanced at her over his shoulder, that infuriating smirk still plastered on his face. And I aim to keep that promise. Arthur, ever the picture of confidence, spun back around and casually grabbed Raven's hand. His fingers curled around hers, warm, firm, decisive. Come on, he said, pulling her along without waiting for an answer. Let's go. Raven's brain stalled for a second. What? Wait. Her voice wavered, a rare stammer slipping through as he led her down the hall like it was the most normal thing in the world. Her cloak fluttered behind her as she hurried to keep up, but the heat crawling up her face was impossible to ignore. From behind, Beast Boy's jaw practically hit the floor. Am I hallucinating? Or did bro is that really our Raven? No, you're not, Jamie muttered, still adjusting his now loosened armor. His brows knit together as he watched them disappear down the corridor. Well, it not our Probelm. Robin for sure will be mad at Raven for letting him in. Beast Boy whistled low. Dude's got moves though. I kinda respect it. Jamie sighed. Yeah, well, if he pulls that with my hand again, I'm breaking his wrist. Beast Boy narrowed his eyes and said, sure. Meanwhile, Arthur led Raven through the halls, his grip steady but relaxed. He didn't even glance back, not once. The dungeon is definitely this way. Raven, on the other hand? Total mess. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Her thoughts were, why was he still holding my hand? And worse, why am I not pulling away? Are you doing this on purpose? She mumbled under her breath, hoping he wouldn't hear. I do everything on purpose, Arthur shot back without missing a beat, his tone annoyingly smug. As they walked, the strange hum from the key in Arthur's pocket grew louder, subtle at first, but building with every step. A faint pulse of energy brushed against his senses, guiding him like an invisible thread. He followed it instinctively, the hum peaking as they stopped in front of a door. This is it, Arthur said, releasing her hand as he pulled the key from his inventory. It glowed faintly, vibrating like it was reacting to something hidden inside. This is where I wanted to go. But when he glanced back at Raven, expecting a snarky comment, he was met with silence. She stood stiffly behind him, her face turned slightly away, but there was no hiding the deep red flush creeping up her neck and across her cheeks. What's wrong? Arthur tilted his head, raising a brow at her. You look like you swallowed a candle. Raven clenched her jaw, struggling to keep her composure. After an awkward pause, she finally muttered under her breath, barely audible, "That's my room." Arthur blinked, processing her words for a moment before his head tilted slightly. Oh. It clicked hard. His eyes darted between the softly humming key in his hand and the door before him. Of all places. Internally, he sighed for the dungeon gate to be here of all places. The system's sense of humor is something else. Raven, meanwhile, was still standing there, face flushed, arms crossed tightly, watching him with a mix of suspicion and confusion. Arthur, because he couldn't resist, broke the silence. Well, he drawled, turning back to her with a half smirk. What I want just happens to be in your room. Raven's eyes widened. What do you mean by that? Oh, don't make it weird. Arthur held up the key like it explained everything. Spoiler alert, it didn't. I'm not the one making it weird, Raven shot back, her voice rising slightly. You just said you wanted something in my room. Do you have any idea how that sounds? Arthur bit back a laugh, but the glint in his eyes gave him away. Relax, it's not like I'm raiding your sock drawer or anything. Her glare sharpened. If you touch anything, I'll teleport you to another dimension and leave you there. Noted. He held up his hands in mock surrender again. But for the record, I have no choice really. Raven squinted at the key still buzzing faintly between his fingers. What even is that? Arthur tilted his head, eyes narrowing in thought as the key pulsed faintly in his grip. For a moment, he considered brushing it off with another joke, but no. This was serious. Without warning, he reached out and grabbed Raven's hands, his touch warm against her cool skin. The sudden contact made her tense, her lips parting slightly in surprise. Look, Arthur said, voice low but firm. You're gonna see something, but you need to keep it to yourself. Do not, and I mean it, do not tell a soul. The weight behind his words sent a chill down Raven's spine. This wasn't his usual teasing or smug attitude. He was serious. Her brows furrowed as she tried to read his expression. What is it? She asked, her voice softer now, curiosity tangled with concern. Arthur didn't answer right away. His eyes flickered, glowing faintly, the usual playful glint replaced by something sharper. Dangerous. Whatever this was, it wasn't a joke. Raven swallowed, her pulse quickening. Okay, I promise, she said, her voice quieter but laced with impatience. Just, what the hell is this thing? Arthur's grip on her hands tightened briefly before he released her. Let's get inside your room first, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Without waiting for her reply, he turned toward the door and pushed it open. Raven hesitated just for a second. Part of her brain screamed that this was insane. Bringing a guy like him, who clearly wasn't supposed to be in the tower, into her room? Yeah, it will look bad to the others no matter what she says. And yet, she followed. The door clicked shut behind them, muffling the sounds of the tower's halls. Her room was exactly what anyone might expect, dimly lit, shelves stacked with ancient books, the faint scent of incense hanging in the air. It was private. Quiet. Arthur took a few steps in, scanning the room with that same unreadable expression. Cozy, he murmured, before pivoting back to her, the key still glowing softly in his hand. All right, Raven crossed her arms, leaning back against her desk, trying to appear casual despite the heat still lingering on her face. We're inside. Now talk. Arthur spun the key between his fingers, as if deciding how much to say. "What I'm about to show you." He flicked his gaze back to hers. "It's not something your team or anyone else should know about." Raven raised an eyebrow, skepticism curling at the edges of her face. Arthur's lips curved into that maddening, familiar smirk, but his eyes still held that strange seriousness. "If I wanted to cause trouble for all of you," he said, stepping closer until there was barely a breath of space between them, "I wouldn't be standing here asking you to trust me." For once, Raven had no snarky comeback. She just nodded, the weight of his words hanging heavy between them. "Good," Arthur said softly, stepping back. Then, with a deep breath, he turned the key. The moment Arthur twisted the key, reality trembled. A jagged, glowing rift tore itself into existence right in front of them, a swirling mass of shadow and silver light, twisting and crackling like it had been ripped straight out of a nightmare. The edges shimmered with an eerie, violet glow, casting strange, flickering patterns against the walls of Raven's room. The air grew thick, humming with an unnatural energy that made the hairs on Raven's neck stand on end. "What the hell?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the low, thrumming sound the portal emitted. Arthur, meanwhile, just tilted his head, watching the portal with that same maddening calm, as if a tear in reality casually opening in a girl's bedroom was no big deal. Raven, however, wasn't about to sit back and let this slide. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing as she studied the swirling mass. "Is this?" She hesitated for a moment before finishing, "Some kind of portal?" "No, it is a portal. The magic I'm sensing from it, it's insane." Without waiting for an answer, she raised a hand, her fingertips glowing faintly with magic as she reached toward it. The second her fingers brushed the edge, ZAP. A sharp crack of invisible force lashed out, sending a jolt up her arm and making her stumble back with a quiet curse. Arthur chuckled softly, crossing his arms. "Yeah, probably shouldn't touch that." Raven glared at him, shaking her hand as the static tingled across her fingers. "Thanks for the warning," she deadpanned. "So? What exactly is it?" Arthur twirled the key once between his fingers before slipping it back into his inventory with a faint shimmer. "A portal, like you said," he admitted, leaning against her wall like he owned the place. "But not just any portal, only I can enter it." Raven's brow furrowed as she processed his words. "And it just happens to be here," she said slowly, a thread of suspicion curling through her voice. "In my room." "Yup." Arthur popped this pea with a smirk, meeting her gaze without a trace of hesitation. Her expression hardened as she crossed her arms, stepping back toward him. "You're telling me," she said carefully, her voice low and skeptical, "that this only works here?" Arthur lifted a hand in mock surrender. "I'm just as confused as you are." "Believe me," he said smoothly. "But hey, fate's funny like that." Raven narrowed her eyes, searching his face for any sign of deception. His usual cocky attitude was still there, but underneath it, he was serious. There was no mockery, no hint of a lie. He was telling the truth. "You're not lying," she finally admitted, though the words felt heavy on her tongue. "Told you," Arthur said, flashing her a grin. "I'm an open book." Raven snorted quietly, but there was no humor behind it. "That's the biggest lie you've told all day." Arthur just laughed, pushing himself off the wall. "All right, fair point," he said, stepping closer to the portal. The strange energy danced across his skin but didn't harm him, like it recognized him. "Anyways, Raven, this portal, it's not going anywhere without me. So I'm going to enter it right now." Her breath hitched. Without thinking, her hand shot out toward him. "Arthur!" Her voice came softer than she intended, a rare crack of concern breaking through her usual calm. Arthur stopped, turning back just enough to meet her eyes. That cocky confidence still lingered, but beneath it, there was something solid, trusting. I'm counting on you to keep this a secret, he said, his tone unusually gentle. I'll be back right here when I'm done. Raven opened her mouth to argue, to demand answers, but the word stuck in her throat. She clenched her fists, knowing deep down he was going to do whatever he wanted regardless of what she said. Idiot, she muttered under her breath. Arthur caught it, of course he did, and a playful smirk tugged at his lips. Glad to know you care about me. Her face heated instantly. I don't. I just... She huffed, crossing her arms tighter around herself. If you get yourself killed, I wouldn't even care. Of course. Arthur chuckled, giving her one last nod before turning back toward the portal. Without another word, he leapt forward straight into the swirling void. The portal didn't explode or shatter. It just vanished, collapsing in on itself like it had never been there, leaving behind nothing but a faint hum of lingering energy hanging heavy in the air. The strange, electric charge faded. The room fell into silence. He was gone. For a long moment, Raven just stood there, her heart pounding louder than she'd ever admit. She exhaled slowly, staring at the spot where the portal had been, the emptiness pressing against her chest. Show off, she whispered, rolling her eyes, but her voice was softer now and a little worried. Arthur landed with a sharp thud on the cold, jagged ground, his boot skidding slightly as he straightened up. The air around him felt wrong, thick with an ancient, almost hungry magic that crawled along his skin like 1,000 unseen hands. He scanned his surroundings, eyes narrowing. Well, would you look at that? He muttered. He was standing on a floating island, a massive chunk of blackened rock, suspended in an endless, storm-lit void. Jagged stone spires pierced the air like broken fangs. In the distance, dozens of other floating islands hovered, some drifting lazily while others crackled with violet lightning. Faint, eerie flying figures moved across them. Arthur exhaled, already feeling the tension coil in his gut. Yeah, this is totally different than the Tower of Fate. Just then, the familiar chime of the system rang out, its tone somehow heavier than usual. Welcome to the Legacy Shadow Legion dungeon. Most of your job-specific skills are now locked. To prove you are worthy of the Legion, one must vanquish the Legion itself, with his own merit. You will fight them here at the peak of their ability. Escape is not an option. There is no exit until the trial is done. You'll be kicked out of the dungeon once you finish this level. Arthur blinked at the last line. Kicked out. He ran a hand down his face, sighing. Of course. Can't make this easy, ho. Locked skills? He figured that was coming. Every prove your worth test always had a catch. But the system booting him out the second he was done after a single level? That was new, and not in a good way. So, what? Every time I want to enter, I gotta swing by Raven's room like a guy sneaking back to his girlfriend's place. His palm smacked against his forehead. Great. That won't be awkward. He could already picture the looks. Beast Boy would crack jokes. Jamie would aim a plasma cannon at his face. And Raven? Yeah, she'd either enjoy it or probably just teleport me into the ocean. Shaking his head, Arthur focused on the task at hand. He took a step forward, the weight of the world shifting beneath his feet. Power thrummed through the air, powerful and old, like the dungeon itself was watching him. All right, Shadow Legion, he muttered, cracking his knuckles. Let's see if you live up to the hype. Arthur extended his hand, fingers curling as he willed his shadows to rise. Nothing happened. He frowned, trying again, this time with more intent. Still nothing. Not a flicker. Not a single loyal soldier crawling to his side. He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. I really can't use them, huh? His voice was low, but there was no panic, just the edge of a grin tugging at his lips. So be it, alone is not a problem for me. In one smooth motion, he summoned his sword, a sleek blade humming with restrained power. The familiar and dangerous Promethean sword. With a shrug, he slung it over his shoulder and began walking, the faint sound of his boots tapping against the strange, floating rock beneath him. The wind howled softly around the floating island, carrying the distant sounds of movement, sharp, cutting, like wings slicing through air. Arthur's senses flared. He stopped mid-step, turning his head just in time to catch a blur streaking across the sky. Flying creatures. Dozens of them. Massive wings. Sleek, obsidian scales reflecting the dim, eerie light of this realm. Their crimson eyes burning like suns, cutting through the mist as they soared past him in a formation. Arthur's eyes gleamed as he tracked their movement, the corners of his mouth curling into a wicked smile. Wyverns, that's my transport. Without a second thought, he crouched slightly, muscles coiling with tension. In a burst of speed, he leapt from the edge of the floating island, the wind rushing past his face as he hurtled toward the flock. All right. Let's see which one of you is worth riding. Titan's Tower. In the quiet of her room, Raven sat cross-legged on the floor, fingers twitching as dark energy swirled faintly around her. Her hood was down, and beads of sweat trailed down her face, an unusual sight for someone as composed as her. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Eyes shut. Focus razor sharp. And still, nothing. Damn it, Arthur, she hissed under her breath, her voice tight with frustration. I really can't sense him at all. She exhaled slowly, attempting to center herself again. But her mind spun, spiraling through possibilities she hadn't considered before. Her brow furrowed as a realization crept in, slow, unsettling. So this is it. Her voice softened as her violet eyes snapped open, glowing faintly. This is why I couldn't sense him before, he's been going inside these portals. Her stomach twisted. Often. So that's how it is. Her mind raced with questions she didn't want to ask. What exactly is he doing in there? And why, out of all places, did this portal appear in her room? And worse, why did it bother her so much? Lost in thought, Raven barely registered the faintest sound outside her door, soft but unmistakable. Whispering. Right on cue. I can't hear a thing, Beast Boy whispered, his pointed ears twitching as he leaned against the door. His green skin shifted slightly as he tried transforming into a bat. No luck. Whatever they are saying is, like, super muffled. Blue Beetle stood beside him, arms crossed, voice dry. Dude, you're half a foot away. I don't think turning into a bat gonna improve your odds. Hey, it's called strategy, bro. Beast Boy rolled his eyes. And if you're so smart, why don't you try listening? Jamie sighed. Fine. With a small whir, the blue scarab armor glowed faintly as he tilted his head toward the door. Nothing. Well? Beast Boy asked, eyebrows waggling. I think she said something about portals and Arthur. Jamie paused. Or maybe a torture and a murder. Honestly, could go either way. Beast Boy snickered. Oh, but seriously, what the hell are they doing inside? Raven shook her head, muttering under her breath, I'm surrounded by idiots. Without warning. What are you two doing? A cold, sharp voice pierced the air. They froze. Beast Boy's soul nearly left his body as Raven materialized behind them, her arms folded across her chest. Her glare? Lethal. Both of them spun around, hands shooting up in immediate surrender. Nothing. Nothing at all. Beast Boy blurted out, grinning nervously. Just, casual hallway patrol. Keeping things safe, as always. Jamie nodded rapidly. Why yeah. Routine security check. Very professional stuff, you know how it is. Raven's eyes narrowed dangerously. Right. For a long, tense moment, no one spoke. Then, Beast Boy tilted his head, blinking curiously. Wait a second, why are you sweating? Her breath hitched. I like the lot. His nose twitched. Kinda smells like Azarath Metrian Zinthos. The hallway exploded in a surge of dark energy. With a yelp, both boys were thrown back. Beast Boy crashing against the wall while Jamie skidded down the floor on his armored back. Okay. Beast Boy wheezed, holding his hands up from the floor. Message received, no more questions. Jamie coughed, pushing himself up. I'm never trusting you to the listener again. Raven, face flushed and fuming, huffed in frustration before vanishing in a swirl of black magic, leaving the two of them groaning on the floor. Worth it, Beast Boy muttered with a grin, despite the ache in his ribs. Jamie just shook his head. Bro. High above the floating islands, the sky was chaos. The wind howled like a beast, ripping through the air as 5 wyverns circled Arthur, massive, scaled monstrosities with leathery wings and jaws lined with jagged teeth. Their crimson eyes burned with primal fury, locking onto the lone intruder who dared to challenge them. And Arthur? He was laughing. Is that all you've got? His voice cut through the wind, wild and sharp, as his glowing eyes gleamed with predatory excitement. One of the wyverns dove at him, a blur of claws and snapping fangs. Arthur didn't flinch. With a pulse of ruler's authority, he twisted mid-air, yanking himself onto its back. The beast shrieked in fury, wings flapping madly as it tried to shake him off, but Arthur moved like a shadow, smooth and relentless. You're not going anywhere. His fingers tightened around the hilt of his Promethean sword, the black blade humming with lethal energy. Without hesitation, he drove it into the base of the wyvern's neck, cutting through scales like butter. Dark blood sprayed across his face, but the wicked smile never left his lips. The beast spasmed beneath him, but Arthur leaned in closer, twisting the blade deeper. He yanked the sword free just enough and with a surge of strength, dragged the dying wyvern toward the others. Another wyvern lunged, jaws open wide. Arthur's eyes flashed. Big mistake. He pulled, forcing the dying beast into a sudden dive. At the last second, he kicked off its back, letting the corpse crash into the attacking wyvern with bone-shattering force. The collision sent both creatures spiraling toward the floating islands below, a tangle of wings and blood. 2 down. Arthur hovered in the air, hair whipping around his face as he twirled his sword with a flick of his wrist. His glowing eyes snapped toward the remaining 3 wyverns, who shrieked in rage. Bring it on, lizards! The sky trembled with the dying echoes of battle. Only 2 wyverns remained. Their massive wings beat the air in frantic bursts, circling above Arthur as if trying to decide whether to fight or flee. Arthur? He just walked. Each step was slow, deliberate, like a predator who already knew how this would end. His glowing blue eyes burned through the haze of blood and smoke, and the air itself seemed to grow heavier, like the world was bending to his will. One of the wyverns finally snapped. With a deafening shriek, it dived toward him, jaws wide enough to crush a boulder. Arthur didn't stop. He didn't even blink. When it got close enough, he moved. In a blur of speed and raw power, his doomsday gauntlet fist shot forward, crack. The punch connected square with the beast's face. The sheer force shattered its snout, sending splinters of bone flying. Its own horn, sharp and curved, was driven straight through its skull. The wyvern's eyes bulged wide with a choking gurgle before its body collapsed in a twitching heap. Arthur shook the blood from his gauntlet, tilting his head. Maybe that was a bit too much. The last wyvern, bigger than the rest, let out a panicked, ear-splitting screech. It flapped its wings in a desperate attempt to escape, already soaring higher. Arthur just raised his hand. "Where do you think you're going?" His voice was calm, almost bored, but the weight behind it was absolute. Ruler's authority surged from his palm, an invisible force crashing into the wyvern like a tidal wave. It jerked mid-flight, slammed down through the air, flailing as if the very sky betrayed it. The beast thrashed helplessly, but Arthur's power was merciless. It wasn't just holding the wyvern, it was dragging it down. With an earth-shaking thud, the creature landed its massive head pinned to the ground. Arthur's boots crunched over broken stone as he approached. Slowly, casually, the wyvern hissed, struggling against the invisible grip locking its limbs. But when Arthur crouched down, his gauntlet-clad hand clamped around its thick, scaly throat, tight enough to make the beast shudder in pain. "Listen closely, big guy," Arthur said, leaning in. His voice dropped lower, colder, dangerous. "I'm not in the mood to waste time. So here's the deal." He lifted his other hand, pointing toward a distant floating island, one that pulsed with an eerie, electric energy. Jagged bolts of purple lightning arced around its edges, and the air around it seemed darker and twisted. "That's where your boss is, isn't it?" His eyes gleamed, piercing and relentless. "You're gonna take me there. Or..." His grip tightened hard. The wyvern let out a strangled growl, its entire body trembling under his grasp. It wasn't defiance, it was fear. Arthur smiled cold and sharp. "Good. You feel fear. It means you are smart enough to understand exactly what I'm saying." With a snap of his fingers, Ruler's authority released its hold. The wyvern's wings unfurled immediately, but it didn't try to run again. It just lay there, panting, broken and obedient. Arthur clapped the beast's neck like he was congratulating an old friend. "Smart choice. Now, let's fly." The wyvern shuddered beneath Arthur's grip, its wings unfurling wide as it lifted off the ground in a powerful burst. Wind howled around him as they climbed higher, the ruined battlefield shrinking below. Arthur stood tall on its back, perfectly balanced, his glowing blue eyes locked on the storm-wreathed island ahead. The closer he got, the more power he felt, a pressure thick in the air, crawling under his skin like static. Ancient. Violent. Alive. This magic. Arthur muttered, tilting his head as he felt the pulse of raw magic grow stronger with every passing second. "I have a theory, could be a dragon. Maybe multiple ones." The thought made him grin. As the wyvern flew closer, the storm clouds churned, parting just enough to reveal a castle, if it could even be called that. It was less a fortress and more a monument to war, jagged black stone, spires that twisted into the sky, and a faint glow of crimson runes crawling across its walls like veins. Bolts of violet lightning crackled around the island, bathing the structure in a harsh, flickering light. Arthur tightened his grip on the wyvern's neck. "Let's go introduce ourselves." With a sharp tug, the beast dove. The wind lashed against his face as they plummeted toward the castle gates, faster, harder, but Arthur didn't flinch. When they were close enough, he moved. In one smooth motion, he leapt from the wyvern's back, his Promethean sword flashing into existence in his hand. The wind tore around him as he spun gracefully mid-air. Arthur's blade gleamed with cold, merciless light. Sheeing. The wyvern never stood a chance. Arthur's sword sliced through its neck like butter, severing its head in one brutal, fluid strike. The massive beast convulsed, its head and body separating mid-air. The head plummeted first, crashing into the ground with a sickening thud, followed almost immediately by the body, a loud, meaty crunch echoing through the desolate sky. And Arthur? He landed seconds later, smooth, graceful, and completely unfazed, right between the two halves of the fallen creature. He spared a glance at the carnage, lips curling into a smile and with a polite bow. "Thanks for the ride." Without sparing it another thought, he straightened his gaze, shifting to the castle looming ahead. The storm howled louder behind him. Every step closer made the air feel heavier, thick with magic so intense it practically hummed against his skin. Whatever was inside wasn't just powerful. It was waiting. Arthur adjusted his gauntlet, eyes gleaming like cold fire. All right. Let's see what's inside. But first. His glowing blue eyes flicked toward the massive wyvern corpse beside him, a gleam of curiosity flashing in his gaze. The eerie hum of magic from the castle called to him, dangerous and enticing, but he had an idea. Most of my job-specific skills are locked, but let me just try this. With a confident stride, Arthur approached the fallen beast. Its lifeless form sprawled across the jagged stone, blood still steaming in the cold air. He placed his gauntleted hand against its scaly hide, feeling the lingering warmth beneath his fingers. Arise! His voice echoed with authority, a command that had once raised entire battlefields of shadowed soldiers. The air around him trembled as dark energy surged outward, seeping into the corpse in waves. And then, nothing. A sharp ding rang out in his mind as a system notification appeared before him: target cannot be extracted. Certain entities within the legacy dungeon are tied to the dungeon's core and cannot be reanimated. Arthur blinked, tilting his head. What? He flicked his fingers, trying again. Arise. Still nothing. Oh, come on. He tried a third time, frustration creeping into his tone, but the system remained as stubbornly unyielding as the corpse beneath his hand. Another notification flashed: certain entities within the legacy dungeon are tied to the dungeon's core and cannot be reanimated. Arthur dragged a hand down his face. Damn it! He muttered, the weight of the restriction sinking in. Of course it wouldn't be that easy. He kicked a loose piece of wyvern horn aside. Guess the system doesn't want me cheesing my way through this. Fine. I didn't need a wyvern army anyway, he said with a sigh, though part of him still imagined how badass it would have been to storm the castle with a fleet of shadow drakes at his back. Guess I'm doing this the old-fashioned way. With that, Arthur stepped forward, his boots striking the ground with quiet purpose as he approached the towering gates of the castle. The gates, massive and jagged like the fangs of some long-dead beast, loomed over him. Without hesitation, Arthur pushed them open, and the moment the doors creaked apart, the world exploded with raw, unrestrained power. A storm of magic blasted outward, crashing against him like a tidal wave. It wasn't subtle, it was wild, chaotic, and hungry. Lightning crackled through the air, lashing at the stone beneath his feet. Arthur's cloak snapped violently behind him, but he didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes burned brighter, twin orbs of cold, electric blue light as he let the wave wash over him. Hence welcoming committees a bit much, don't you think? He muttered, voice dripping with amusement. But beneath the power he sensed them. Humanoid presences. A lot of them. And not weaklings, either. Their auras rippled through the place like distant heartbeats, each one sharp and potent. Guess I'm scratching the dragon theory. He murmured, his glowing eyes narrowing as he focused on the aura swirling within the castle's depths. No, this wasn't the primal, towering presence of dragons. It was something else, darker. The magic wasn't just wild, it was twisted, tainted, laced with a malevolent hunger. Demons. Arthur muttered, his voice low and edged with certainty. He didn't know how he recognized it, but he felt it. He just somehow could tell just what kind of mana this is. Arthur's boots echoed against the cold, black stone as he moved down the shadowed corridor. The air was suffocating with magic. Each step stirred a faint pulse beneath his feet, as though the castle itself was alive, watching his every move. The only sound was the steady rhythm of his footsteps, reverberating against the towering walls. His glowing blue eyes scanned everything, every shadow, every flicker of movement. Something was waiting. At the end of the hall, a massive set of doors, twisted black iron and veined with crimson light, stood ajar. Without hesitation, Arthur pushed them open, stepping through. And the world changed. The suffocating interior of the castle was gone. Now, Arthur stood on a vast, open battlefield. A place that shouldn't exist within the structure he just left. The sky above churned with swirling black clouds, jagged streaks of lightning splitting the heavens in violent bursts. The ground beneath his feet was blackened stone, cracked and scorched, with thick coils of mist crawling along the edges like hungry serpents. Gusts of wind howled through the air, carrying the scent of steel and blood. Arthur's gaze swept the arena, sharp and unyielding, then he saw them. The demon knights. Dozens of them. Standing in perfect formation, their blackened armor gleamed beneath the storm's light, each one unique, each one deadly. They were no mindless beasts. He could feel their eyes, those burning violet orbs locked onto him, gleaming with intelligence and purpose. Some held jagged swords, their edges pulsing with an eerie, crimson glow. Others clutched spears that thrummed with barely contained energy. A few stood taller, wielding massive axes and maces, each strike from those weapons could shatter stone. Their presence was suffocating, an army of executioners waiting for the first move. And yet, Arthur smiled. His fingers flexed, his doomsday gauntlets creaking as his magic surged. Power rolled through him fierce, unyielding. He stepped forward, calm as ever, like the chaos around him was nothing more than a stage set for his arrival. Arthur's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight before him. A gust of wind whipped past, tugging at his coat as the knights shifted in unison, silent, disciplined, and ready to kill the demon knights. Their presence was unmistakable, even in a place as bizarre as this. The polished armor, the eerie red glow bleeding from their visors, and the cold, calculated way they stood in formation. His lips curled into a smirk. Well, I'd recognize those bastards anywhere. The demon knights from the demon castle. His voice was low, almost amused, but his eyes burned with anticipation. Such a strange place to find them on a floating island, inside a castle wrapped in a storm. Guess this dungeon's pulling out all the stops. His gaze shifted toward the back of the formation. 3 knights stood apart from the rest. Different. Stronger. Their armor was thicker, more ornate, and the aura radiating from them hummed with danger. One carried a massive greatsword resting on his shoulder, another held twin glaives, and the last, a towering figure, gripped a spiked flail crackling with dark energy. And some of you look tough. Good. Arthur rolled his shoulders, the bone-white gauntlets flexing around his fists as sparks of magic crackled around his arms. He exhaled slowly, then smiled wide. Enough time wasting. He moved. In a flash of terrifying speed, Arthur shot forward, a blur of black and silver cutting through the stormlit arena. The ground beneath his feet cracked as he launched himself into the air, fists clenched. Boom! He came down like a meteor, slamming his fist into the earth. The impact exploded outward in a wave of raw force, shattering the blackened stone and sending a massive shockwave through the ranks of demon knights. Several of them staggered back, their armored boots scraping against the cracked ground, while others were flung into the air like ragdolls. Dust and debris swirled around him, but Arthur stood tall in the center. He tilted his head slightly, eyes glowing a brilliant, icy blue as he looked up through the settling dust. The demon knights were already recovering, their weapons raised, but Arthur only smiled wider, heart pounding with excitement. The moment the dust settled, they attacked. A dozen demon knights surged toward Arthur in a tide of steel and fury, their weapons gleaming under the flashing lightning above. Their movements were fast, too fast for anything human, but to Arthur they might as well have been moving in slow motion. His glowing eyes flared as he stepped into the fray, a sharp grin cutting across his face. You're gonna have to be the demon monarch himself to land those hits. The first knight came from the left, spear thrusting for his ribs, but Arthur twisted, letting the blade graze the air beside him. In a blur, his hand snapped out, grabbing the spear mid-thrust. With a flick of his wrist, the shaft splintered, and his elbow smashed into the knight's helmet, caving it in with a sickening crunch. Another came from behind. Arthur didn't even glance back. His hand glowed with ruler's authority, and the demon's sword froze mid-swing, trembling as if caught in an invisible grip. With a twitch of his fingers, the blade reversed direction, impaling its owner straight through the chest. I love this skill. A third knight lunged from the front, sword raised high. Arthur ducked under the blade, fluid and agile, before driving a savage uppercut straight into the demon's jaw. The force sent it flying backward, its helmet cracking as it slammed into the stone wall. A spear from above. A sword from his flank. A glaive sweeping low. Arthur moved like a shadow, weaving through the onslaught with effortless precision. He pivoted on his heel, catching a knight by the wrist and snapping it backward with a sickening pop. Another demon lunged, but Arthur met it with a spinning kick to the chest, sending the creature crashing into 3 more. His fingers curled and his greatsword materialized in the air beside him, crackling with power. With a flick of ruler's authority, it spun like a whirlwind, blade singing through the air as it carved a path of destruction. Sheeing, sheeing, sheeing. 3 demon knights fell at once, heads severed cleanly as the sword danced through their ranks. The blade returned to his hand with a snap, just in time for Arthur to deliver a crushing diagonal slash, beheading another knight in a single, graceful motion. Still not enough, come! A roar echoed behind him, a larger knight with a jagged axe charged, armor glowing with eerie violet runes. Arthur didn't bother turning. With ruler's authority, he yanked the demon off its feet, slamming it face first into the ground hard enough to shatter the stone. The arena trembled under the sheer force of his dominance. Another demon tried to retreat. Bad move. Arthur's hand shot up, fingers clenching the air. The knight froze mid-flight, struggling as if held by invisible chains. Where do you think you're going? He dragged the demon back through the air with brutal force, its limbs thrashing helplessly. The moment it was within reach, Arthur's gauntlet-clad hand seized its neck, crushing the armor like paper. With a sharp twist, crack, the demon's head lolled to the side. Arthur let the body drop, eyes burning with an unyielding light. This is all you've got. His voice was calm, too calm. I expected more from the peak of their ability. This is disappointing. Arthur's grip on his greatsword tightened as the last 3 demon knights stood their ground, their towering frames radiating a dark, lethal aura. Their armor was different. If these were the strongest, they certainly looked the part. But Arthur wasn't impressed. The 3 demons bristled, their weapons humming with dark energy, but Arthur wasn't even looking at them anymore. His eyes lifted toward the sky, narrowing. Something shifted in the clouds. A shadow. Massive. The storm overhead swirled with violent fury as wings huge, jagged, and lined with glowing veins of electricity unfurled from the blackened sky. The air grew heavier, crackling with raw power as the figure descended, its form emerging from the lightning itself. And then it landed. A thunderous boom shook the arena as the creature touched down, massive talons digging into the stone floor. Its scales shimmered like polished ivory, glowing faintly beneath the arcs of lightning dancing across its body. Each step it took left a trail of scorched stone. Its serpentine eyes, an intense, searing yellow, locked onto Arthur with unexpected intelligence. A white wyvern. Lightning incarnate. Arthur blinked once. Then scratched the back of his head, his expression shifting from curiosity to sheer disbelief. Kai Sale.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously appreciate it if you could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out a lot and keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.